Good evening, council. Good evening, staff. Members of the public that are joining us, welcome. We'll call this meeting to order, council meeting of December the 8th, 2021. And I will start with the welcome and council commitment. So the council commitment, Stacey, I don't have to get them to stand. I said we don't have to stand.
Now that you're wearing your mask, it's okay, but whichever.
Okay, I will do sitting. That's fine. Council commitment for the town of Penetanguishene. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you for attending. So now we will move on to the approval of the agenda, and that is that the agenda of the regular council meeting of December 8, 2021 be approved as presented. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Sanema, Councillor Cummings, all in favor. Thank you. Anyone having a declaration of pecuniary interest may do so now or at the appropriate time. We move on to 6, which is public meeting. And we do have public meeting tonight. Read the zoning bylaw amendment file number ZA 7-2021 for 21 Hunter Road. So there is a public meeting tonight under section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an application for a zoning bylaw amendment to the town's zoning bylaw 2000-02. The municipal address is 21 Hunter Road, being part of the village of Bay Moorings community, and the area is located at the end of Durham Drive. So to council, the purpose of this public meeting is to provide an opportunity for the public to make comments. The purpose of this public meeting is not to engage in a debate regarding the merits of the application, nor is it intended to be a question and answer session. There is an opportunity under matters for consideration to ask questions. To the public, this is your opportunity to speak, and we encourage you to do so. In accordance with the Planning Act, if a person does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed or an approval given, you will not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and you may not be added as a party to a hearing on an appeal to the OLT unless, in the opinion of the OLT, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So, Madam Planner, there we is. Andrea, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and the public. So we have received a rezoning application for the property as identified at 21 Hunter Road. The application is to rezone a portion of that lands into a site-specific zone to permit the construction of a private recreational center with some site-specific provisions around its location. Notice of tonight's public meeting was given on November 16th, and it was given via mail directly to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. In total to date, we have received, I think, about 41 comments. They have still come in every now and then. I think council had an addendum to their agenda with some additional submissions that we received after last week's publication. So to date, as I mentioned, about 41 comments varying in support or opposition to the application. My count is that there's 31 in favor and 10 in opposition to it. So I do believe tonight we have Andrew Pacuzio on behalf of the Village of Bay Moorings. He's on the call tonight from Zoom, and he will give council a presentation to fully explain the application better and then to receive comments.
Thank you, Andrea. So we now turn to the audience.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just having the presentation, Mr.
Oh, we are
Pacuzio.
going to have a presentation on,
I
okay.
think,
I
yeah,
didn't
he's going to try and
see it on my agenda.
Mr. Chair, can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Andrew Pascuzzo. I'm a registered professional planner here on behalf of Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities. They've made an application for a zoning bylaw amendment, as your planning director has indicated. I've got a short presentation, but obviously we're here to hear from the public with any questions or concerns on the application. So I do have a team with me here tonight. As I said, I'm the registered professional planner on the file that's provided the planning justification and rationale for the zoning bylaw amendment. Also participating on the line are Mr. Ken Harvey, who's the project manager, and Pamela Wright, who is the regional property manager, both from Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities, Inc. With us as well as Stephanie from MCL Architects, who submitted the site plan as well as the architectural drawings and renderings to the municipality to date. You've also got Mr. Dean Ives, the professional engineer from WMI and Associates. So WMI submitted the drainage and grading plan as well as the site servicing plan for the site plan approval. So the existing community that the application has been submitted for contains 123 existing residential units, which are occupied by adults, predominantly 55 plus. There is currently no recreational facility on site. We've received quite a bit of feedback, and we feel that the majority of the neighborhood wants the recreational facility, and that's why Parkbridge has proceeded with the application. They believe that the addition of the recreation facility will be a positive one for the community and promote the community spirit and social engagement, and will increase the overall value and attraction of the community. The image before you now shows the location of the recreation hall in the, I'll call it the northeastern section of the property. As you can see, you've got a number of residential units with what I describe as an open space that runs north-south, splitting Drummond Street to the east, and then Chamberlain Crescent, and the proposed rec hall is right at the east end of Durham Drive. Fox Street is on your west side of the screen before you. This slide shows the existing site where the recreation facility is located. There is an existing gazebo on the property now. You can also see some of the riprap here, as well as the trees. Drummond Street and the residential units occur beyond those trees off to the east. And as you can see, this is the right of way here in the foreground. So the proposed recreation facility is to be 1 story. There is a rendering or renderings later on in the presentation. It's 150 square meters or 1,600 square feet. There will be a kitchen, a washroom, a meeting room, and exterior deck. There are currently 8 parking spaces proposed. The site, the facility will be accessible. There's an accessibility ramp that would allow access at the front of the building. The proposed hours currently are with availability for use from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. And it will only be used by those living in the neighborhood, and they will be able to rent the space. Types of events would include, upcoming Christmas activities, for example, a Super Bowl party or card groups. There'll be a maximum capacity of 25 people to the recreation facility. I'm not sure the clarity on your end, but this image shows the site plan with the 8 parking spaces, including an accessible space along Durham Drive, the wheelchair access ramp, the main entrance to the facility. You can see the deck off to the east, as well as the retaining wall. This image also shows the existing riprap, which obviously removes water from the site, draining it currently. Once the retaining wall is constructed, the riprap would occur along the outside of that retaining wall. This is an image that shows the interior of the building. As you can see, the lower end of the figure is the main entrance with the opened area here, fireplace and TV. The exterior entrance is at the east end of the property to the patio. We've got the mechanical storage room, 3 washrooms, and then the kitchen area. This is another one of the engineering drawings displaying servicing as well as you can see once again the retaining wall east of the building. So the purpose of the amendment is that currently a recreation facility is not a permitted use in the existing residential land lease community 1 RLLC1 zone. And so this application is to rezone to allow an exception which would permit the construction of the recreation facility. Along with the zoning bylaw amendment application, there's also a concurrent site plan application, and at a later date, if council supports the zoning bylaw amendment and staff support the site plan, then we would obviously proceed with a building permit application to your building department. The images here show the renderings of the proposed recreational facility. As you can see, it's a 1-story structure. You can see what is Durham Street here with the accessibility ramp, the landscaping in the front. You could also see the retaining wall around the rear of the property, and obviously the trees have been superimposed on this rendering here. This image would be facing north along the eastern side of the proposed rec facility, which would show the outdoor amenity feature of the back deck. So as Andrea explained previously, there has been quite a bit of feedback from the public. This is an earlier iteration of the plan. I wasn't aware that there is more comments that have come in. The tally I had was 22 in support and 8 objecting. I'm assuming we'll be hearing from some of those concerned citizens tonight, but the majority of the comments I've placed into these 6 categories. The first being concern about an abundance of parking spaces being required. For clarity, there won't be any parking on the street, and it's the opinion of myself as well as those at Parkbridge that the majority of the users will walk to use the facility, and they are within a short walking distance between a few hundred feet and the maximum of the most being 500 to 600 feet. So it is a shorter walk. And then in terms of noise, there has been some concerns about noise. I'd reiterate that you obviously do have a noise bylaw within your municipality, and that the hours of operations would only be from 8:30 to 8 p.m. with a maximum of 25 people. There was questions about the existing drainage and how those would be impacted. The current drainage features will be removed and replaced, as I tried to explain in the images previously. But as such, the existing drainage characteristics are being maintained. So there should not be any concerns related to anyone's backyards being flooded by this proposal, because obviously a site plan approval is required and a professional engineer has been retained to provide the proper drainage and grading for the site. With regard to emergency vehicle access, I think the concern there is that there would be a lot of parking on the street, and if there was ever an emergency, that vehicles would not be able to access the facility. So to reiterate again, there will be no vehicles parked on the streets, and there won't be any change once the rec facility is constructed, if it is. With regard to snow storage, that was another item that has been raised by some of the concerned citizens. Snow will be removed from the site as required, as it is now. It's currently temporarily stored along the sides of the right of ways, and once it reaches a certain amount, it's taken away. Parkbridge takes care of the private removal of it. There was another concern that there would be removal of the tree line at the rear of the property, and I'll just say with confidence that there will be no trees removed as part of the applications future construction on the site. The next slide just shows an example of the typical events calendar. You can see there's exercises, euchre, barbecue events. I think there was some concerns about what the facility would be used for and how busy it would be. So these are just kind of a general schedule of what's happened in the past. So at this point, obviously we're here as a team to address any comments or concerns that may be raised by the public or council. But I just turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. That's the end of my presentation for now. We're obviously here to answer any questions, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if anyone in the audience or with us on Zoom who wish to make comments in opposition or in support of the application based on land use planning issues relevant to the application, we'd ask that you please state your name and address for the record. We have a lady with us in audience. She can come to the podium.
I'm Donalda Croft. I live at 20 Durham Drive. And as for the proposal versus the ones that are for it, there's only 10 units that are on Durham Drive, and it affects us. It doesn't affect the other 113. And I'm concerned about drainage because we're on cement slabs, and Parkbridge definitely wouldn't repair any damage that was done, because they bargain in bad faith from past experiences. And for parking, the majority of people do not walk. We have 80, 90-year-olds that they're supposed to carry their case and a crock pot. They can barely walk on their own. So they definitely would need to drive. We have people with health issues, mobility issues, that can't walk basically more than out to their car. And parking is not sufficient. We have 123 units, say a quarter of the people come. The people up in Drummond, they're not going to be walking down the hill. And emergency vehicle access, I would think it's an issue because on Durham Drive, we have many people with health issues. And I believe it would devalue my property because I paid an excessive amount of money for an end unit. And I don't want to be looking out at a building. And I'm sure someone who would want to buy my property wouldn't want a community building in their backyard. And snow removal is a definite issue because we have snow now just after the little bit of snowfalls we've had, which is higher than the gazebo. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sarah, do we have anyone online?
Your worship, we do have several members of the public that have joined us through Zoom, so we'll just give them a chance to send Sarah a message through Zoom or attempt to turn on their microphone to speak, just to give them a little bit of a chance. I don't know, it doesn't look like Sarah. Oh, we have somebody. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Tim Bianco, and I'm also a resident of the Village of Bay Moorings. Just for clarification, I understand that the maximum allowable number of people is 25.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
I see. All right, thank you very much.
It doesn't appear there are any other members of the public through Zoom looking to provide comments, and we just have the one member of the public here in council chambers. So I believe that is everyone.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So with that, the concluding comments from the applicant or the agent, do we have any concluding comments?
Mr. Chair, I don't have any other comments. I respect the comments and the concerns that have come in. We'll work with staff to hopefully address those comments to their satisfaction if possible. Thank you very much for your opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Members of council, any members of council have any questions concerning the information that was presented this evening? There being none, then thank you everyone for your attendance and participation, and the council will consider the application and the results of the public meeting at a future meeting. We now move on to deputations and presentations, and we start with the Penetanguishene Secondary School documentary unveiling. So Mr. CAO, could you comment on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. What we're going to see in a few moments is a digital documentary of our local former Penetanguishene Secondary School. It's a digital documentary of 52 years of history at the facility that will be available to the public after this evening and also archived in our local Penetanguishene Museum. It's a document or a product that staff is very proud of. We did go through a competitive process to engage a third-party videographer to build this for us. But I think it's extremely fair to say that this wouldn't have happened without the assistance of a number of members in the community and community groups as well. But I think there's special recognition that needs to be identified. We had struck a committee, a PSS commemoration committee. Those committee members were Irene Mao, James Dawzell, Barb Anderson, Kaylee Heath, and Donald DeRoche. And they guided a number of aspects of what you would have noticed occurred through the Penetanguishene Secondary School process over the summer months. So a special recognition to that committee. They certainly provided countless hours of assistance and guidance to staff. The document is 10 minutes and certainly a significant work of art. I think there's also special recognition that should be made to our museum curator, Nicole Jackson, who is sitting behind me and didn't know I was going to mention that. But a big thank you to Nicole. She guided this from a staff perspective. And of course, Sherry Desjardins, Director of Rec and Community Services as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, Sarah will tee up the video, and as I said, it will be unveiled to the public tomorrow. But we wanted to unveil it to council through this means. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
When you first come here, you're always in that stage of fear, not knowing what you're going from the elementary to the secondary school. Then after you do your school years, you gain friendships and everything else. And coming back now, you look and say, I thought it was so big, but look how small it is.
It was very nice to be able to be back in here after 5 years of having it been closed. And I was participating with the tours that we had of the school, and it was very, very good just to wander through and get some of the memories back.
When I came in 1986, this school was bilingual. It offered courses in French and English. It was actually called École Secondaire Penetanguishene Secondary School. The announcements were in English and French. The yearbook was published in English and French. The staff room was full of French and English being spoken. So it was a very unique situation. We would get a large percentage of the graduating class from the neighboring Catholic elementary school coming here, and it was simply because the parents had been students here and they were quite comfortable with sending their kids here and not shipping them off to Midland.
Very big and important role in attracting families to this area during the time the school was open. We came from Toronto in the early 70s, and we were very happy to be able to be part of the Penetanguishene Secondary School.
Most of the people from the town for years went to that high school. I know it's been a few years that they haven't had it, but even just having the building there makes it still kind of feel like it's part of the town. It's going to be weird to have it gone.
Some of the ones that come back to me is Mr. Bayfield. He was a geography teacher. That was one of my favorite classes.
Very much enjoyed my English classes. Mr. Jim Greenfield was a wonderful, wonderful teacher.
Mr. Hartman was sort of the most memorable one for me because phys ed obviously was my favorite class, and so I had him always for gym.
When you teach phys ed, it's a unique situation in that you only have to take one phys ed course in order to graduate in Ontario. So basically, you were dealing with a group of students who had chosen to be in that course. I had very few disciplinary problems. The kids wanted to be there. The worst thing I could say to someone if they were stepping out of line was, you go get changed, no more today.
I loved being a student with Mr. Hartman. He was such an awesome teacher. He was the volleyball coach and, just coached phenomenal volleyball teams, and they were top OFSA champions, and it was awesome being a student with them. So it was always good to stay on his good side because you didn't want to cross him. You see him upset, and it wasn't a fun thing to see. So, but yeah, he was a great teacher.
I will admit that a lot of the students that I got along with well, teaching them phys ed, I probably would have been ready to wring their neck if I was teaching them math or English.
And we had a population in the late 70s of over 900 students, so we had 3 portables out the back to handle the overflow, and one of them was music. We had a very, very good music teacher, John Cool. It was a wonderful class, and we actually produced 2 records. So I played clarinet, and there was our senior band, junior band, and a dance band. So they participated and played throughout the years as well. But I enjoyed making the record, and I still have a copy of that.
So I would say this floor here probably played a good part of my years of being my favorite part of the school. And then also the shop wing down on the, I would say the northern part of the school also played a part in my favorite parts too, because that were the shops and what things I enjoyed doing it.
When I think about high school, I think about the gym, and that's basically where I lived. That was my home. I used to eat my lunch in the change room. Like I just lived in the gym basically.
We were all thrown in together from 3 different communities, Penetanguishene, Perkinsville, and LaFontaine, so we met a lot more friends, and I still have some of those friendships from grade 9.
The ones that are important to you, you hold on to. The ones that are, yes, we were together for a good part of our schooling years. Sometimes they fall by the wayside, but I think the biggest thing is you come cross paths somewhere in life and everything else. Down the road, maybe you haven't seen somebody for 15 years, all at once, bang, you see that individual out in the community and you talk to them and just remember the old days.
It's funny living in small town Ontario, how often you run into ex-students. Most of the time I can come up with the first name for sure. The ones I'm in touch with more are the ones that through coaching, those connections are very strong.
Met some of my best friends in high school, some that I'm still in touch with a lot. We were talking to a few of them the other day, and I don't know if I should say, I guess it's too late now, it's cat's out of the bag, but we used to sneak up and drink on the roof. And some of them were like, hey, we should go do that again for old time's sake. You know, again, it's because tearing it down shortly, so.
What was happening in Simcoe County was there was huge growth in the south of Simcoe County. So they were having to produce more school classrooms and building schools in the south. However, the total population, you had to take northern Simcoe into account, and we weren't growing. And so you had two schools that were under capacity, and one of them was going to have to be shut down in the eyes of the school board. However, the review committee actually came out and said both schools should remain open. Then it went to a vote, and the trustees said, no, we're shutting one and it's going to be PSS.
So back in November of 2015, the school put out a volunteer wish list for the committee that was going to be participating in the closing of the school and the 50th anniversary of the school. So we started meeting weekly from November to the end of May. And we had different groups set up. So there was the group of students who were here in the 60s throughout to the 2015, and every group had its own room. So all the volunteers for each room had put together memories of that time that they were here. So in the 60s and the 70s, when we still had a local newspaper, all the papers were being collected and all the sports events and everything else were put up on collages for that specific room. So that was really, really well attended because everybody saw the pictures in the paper and all the memories of what had happened during their 5 years there and during that decade as well. So we had a lot of volunteers putting that together.
When the school closed, it was a big shock to the community now that we don't have a school in town. I don't know if that changed anybody's philosophies of should we live in Penetanguishene or should we live in Midland now because the high school's there. So the school did play a very big part of our community, and the loss was shown in the municipality when we lost our school.
That school was a very, very huge part of my life. Just knowing that they're tearing it down was a little emotional. Just, you know, now that we're back living in Penetang and have kids here, I kind of saw my kids going to that school, so it was just a lot of mixed emotions.
A lot of great memories here in this gymnasium. I've had enough time to process the idea that PSS is gone. That part's sad. It was a very unique school. Things evolve. There's a brand new high school in Midland at the Georgian Bay Secondary, and the kids from Penetang are bused over there. From what I hear from my colleagues that moved there, the school's flourishing. It's doing very well.
So our business is called the Pulse Nutrition. We do smoothies, aloe tea. It's nutrition based, like as I said, the coach thing. My wife and I are both wellness coaches. And yeah, just again, with the community, trying to give back, trying to keep people healthy. It's interesting now too, being part of the fire department. And we had done a bunch of training at the school. And now as the school's about to be demolished, we're going in there to start working on breaking down walls and all that. So that's going to be interesting to be part of some of the demolition of the school. Just going to be some weird emotions for that as well. It's neat to be able to have this school be so many different parts of my life.
Wonderful staff that I taught with, amazing group of teachers, the administration over the years, lucky to have such a great group of students. The unique part being that the size of the school allowed so many of the staff and students to interact in things outside of the classroom. And I think that's what made PSS extremely successful.
When you come back to a school after being away from the school for many years after graduating in 1989, coming back here now in my role in the municipality as a facilities manager, this got put into my portfolio also to watch the school until we get ready to demolish the building and everything else. It's hard to believe that I was a student of the school and now I'm part of the demolition of a former school, getting ready for the future development, whatever it's going to be. A thing most people won't be able to say they get to do in life. Attend as a student and now as a person working for a municipality, be part of the demolition process and possibly making the future plans of what this site is going to be. So that would be my kind of final remarks.
This is, I guess, the last few thoughts I could have on the school is just want to thank the school and everybody in it. Some of my most cherished memories and biggest parts of my life I equate to that school. Just leaving my mark and the school leaving its mark on me. The proper goodbye I couldn't even say to it, but it's never going to be gone. It's always going to be part of my heart.
And with that, I certainly commend those who were responsible for putting this video together. And I'm sure that it brings fond memories to a lot of people and probably a lot of members of council here. I think that probably a few of them, the younger ones down that end, may have attended that school. And so I'm sure that good memories. So thank you again. And Nicole, thank you for your part. On to adoption of minutes not already confirmed. Minutes that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Council meeting November 10th, 21 and special council meeting November 10th, 21. Mover and a seconder. Councilor Rose, Councilor Sinema. All in favor? That is carried. I would also probably I would like to acknowledge the fact that we don't see Councillor Mayette and Councillor Levy sitting at the table here with us, but they are with us on Zoom, and I failed to acknowledge their presence earlier. And Councillor Levy and Councillor Mayette, nice seeing you. Thank you. Consent agenda, fine. Matters for consideration. Verbal update from the Chief Administrative Officer re COVID-19 municipal impacts. That the verbal update from the Chief Administrative Officer be received for information. Mr. CAO, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to provide the regular update that I do provide to council at our monthly meetings, which includes updates that have occurred since our last regular council meeting on November the 10th. From a provincial perspective, on December 2nd, the province accelerated booster eligibility for adults aged 50 plus. On December 7th, the province extended the pause on lifting capacity limits in a number of different settings where proof of vaccination is required. Those settings included food and drink establishments with dance facilities, such as nightclubs, wedding receptions, meeting event spaces, etc., as well as other adult entertainment establishments. And also on December the 7th, the province extended COVID-19 paid sick days through to the end of July 2022. From a public health perspective, our local Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit is placing a significant emphasis on youth aged 5 to 11 in terms of vaccinations, and certainly folks in the community. The adult community that are looking to book first, second, or third dose can do so on the provincial portal. But in the community clinics, they are directing an emphasis on the folks aged 5 to 11, but will communicate on a regular basis if they're opening clinics up for folks outside of that age bracket. On November the 23rd, we had a letter of instruction from Dr. Gardner at SMDHU, Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, addressed to owners and operators of sport and recreation facilities. And really what that letter indicated was a new requirement for individuals 12 years of age and older that are attending or involved in indoor organized sports and recreational fitness. And that as of today, December the 8th, those individuals must have at least one dose. On February 16th, 2022, they must have a second dose. And then beginning January 1st, 2022, they're allowing a grace period for those that are in their that are hitting their 12th birthday for vaccine purposes. On November 26th, SMDHU issued a letter to the municipal CAOs asking that municipalities advise them of large-scale sport and recreational events that either occur over multiple days, multiple venues, or are 1,000 people or more that are either attending and or participating in those events. Just last week on December 3rd, there was an additional letter to the municipal CAOs that really addressed the increased transmission that we're experiencing, reminding and advising that staff social gatherings really need to be conducted remotely. They wanted to ensure that the municipal safety plans for facilities are updated, enabling remote work wherever reasonably possible, and just a general reminder that face coverings, distancing, screening, hygiene, et cetera, really need to stay top of mind. And the last caveat was any large community gatherings that exceed 500 people. So really starting to trim that notification to smaller events, given what we're experiencing. And the last letter that we received last Friday, December 3rd, was really just a reminder to the general business and local organizations, as well as residents, that really Simcoe Muskoka District Health is, given the increased transmission, they wanted to provide significant lead time, that there is consideration being given on the potential for capacity limits that were recently lifted back in October. I think Dr. Gardner, it's fair to say that Dr. Gardner will keep a close eye on that and certainly will be a last resort. But he's really hoping that things start to head in the right direction. In terms of the municipality, some of the changes that have occurred since 4 weeks ago that are noted, of course, I talked about a few up above that impact our municipal rec facilities. But our local junior C team, the Penetanguishene Kings, hosted their first booster club during last week's Friday night home game and certainly followed provincial guidelines. We also hosted Festival of Lights last Friday evening, which had a fantastic turnout and was all around deemed a great success. Certainly, of course, folks adhered to provincial guidelines. From a vaccine site perspective, as of today, we had over 80% of our adult community that had received at least one dose in Simcoe Muskoka, as well as with just under 75% that had their second dose. So seeing numbers increase for the better, and certainly continue to encourage the community to get out there and get their doses. I noted 4 weeks ago that we are hosting a community clinic once a week on Tuesdays from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., I believe, at our arena. That's going to occur right through to the spring. And again, the focus is currently on those aged 5 to 11. And for those that are looking for their boosters, 50 plus throughout the county. Again, Simcoe Muskoka District Health will continue to keep us in the loop, and we will push out communication to the general population as we receive it. The last thing I would just note is that certainly with the Delta-driven fourth wave, as well as the new and possibly more transmissible Omicron variant of concern, our control group continues to stay close and abreast of the situation and continue to meet regularly. And certainly we'll keep council and the community in the loop as we notice any significant changes. With that, Your Worship, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any members of council have any questions through to the CAO? No, there being none, then we will move on. B.
Sorry, Your Worship, we just need a mover and a seconder to receive that
yes,
for information.
okay. Mover and a seconder on this report. Councillor Klug and Councillor LaRose, all in favor? Okay. So B, background to public meeting rezoning bylaw amendment file number ZA 7 2021 21 Hunter Road, PL 2 2021-81. That this report be received for discussion and that staff be directed to prepare a report for a future committee of the whole meeting to address any comments received at the public meeting. Mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Cummings, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to site plan SPA-02 2021-212 Gilwood Park Drive, PL 2021-76. That site plan approval be granted for the property at 212 Gilwood Park Drive. Application SPA-02-2021 and keeping with the staff report PL 2021-76. Any questions or concerns with this? Mover and the seconder, Councillor LaRose and Councillor Vallivoncoeur, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. D, Joint Ontario Building Code, OBC Building Code Act, BCA Services Agreement, Penetanguishene and Midland, PL 2021-69. That the town of Penetanguishene agrees conditionally, subject to approval by Town of Midland Council, to an extension of the current joint services agreement for a period of 1 year for the provision of Ontario Building Code Act services to the town of Penetanguishene from January 1, 2022 until December 31, 2022 for $124,000, subject to adjustment upon confirmation of November CPI. A mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Vadebonker. Any questions or concerns with this one? Madam Deputy Mayor?
Not a question or a concern. I just wondered if our Director of Planning could comment or have a few comments to make on, I know I understand that this is working well, but I would like to hear it from her as well.
So thank you very much through your worship to Deputy Mayor Dubo. So this is an opportunity that the town has taken advantage over the past couple of years, this shared service agreement, where we leverage the building resources in the town of Midland to help the town of Penetanguishene provide the statutory requirements. We've been very fortunate that we've had, a really good arrangement and agreement in the past. You may be aware that Midland has had some turnover in staff, and so that's part of the reason why this agreement's coming sort of at the end of the year to make sure we can get an extension for 1 more year. And it will be during that time, we're going to look at the agreement a little bit more in detail, some of the clauses in the agreement itself, and come back to council before further extension. So it is working well. We're pleased with it and wanted to make sure that council has this in time for 2022.
Good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, moving on to E. Oh, did I get the mover and the seconder on that?
You did.
I
But
did.
I had a,
Do you have a comment?
yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to point out in the report, it talks about the town of Midland undertaking a service review of their building department. And I just wanted to mention that there may be impacts on the town of Penetanguishene as a result of that service review. I know our director is aware, she's engaged, and certainly will bring any changes to our attention as soon as she's made aware. But it is something that we just need to keep our eye on, and depending on what happens, we may be back again having a similar conversation. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Okay, and did I call for the vote? No, all in favor. And that is carried. Next, E is an agreement with St. Anne's for Community Ice Rink, RCS 21-33, that the draft agreement as presented in attachment number 1 between the town of Penetanguishene and St. Anne's Episcopal Church for the use of church lands as a temporary outdoor rink be approved, and that the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Recreation and Community Services are hereby authorized to make minor alterations to the agreement that does not substantially change its content. Mover and a seconder. Councilor LaRose, Councilor Saint-Amand. Any questions or concerns? All in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the updated agreement, York University and Ecology Garden CL 2021-09, that staff be authorized to proceed with the draft agreement presented in attachment number 1 with York University to utilize a designated portion of Ecology Garden for the purposes of developing a climate change solutions park, and that the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Recreation Community Services are hereby authorized to make minor alterations to the agreement that does not substantially change its comment. Mover and a seconder. Councilor Mayette and Councilor Saint-Amand. Any questions or concerns with this one? Madam Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a great event for Penetanguishene. I was just wondering, I guess I would direct this to the CAO if we're going to make some kind of public announcement. I think this is certainly been in the works for a little while. It has great potential for us. And climate change, of course, is front and center. So I would just ask the CAO if we have an opportunity to have a press release or certainly mention it in our weekly bulletins.
Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Madam Deputy Mayor. Certainly, that's our intent. I think what we identify in the report is that we will work with our local EDC and S Corporation, as well as York University, once we've got a final agreement. And it's fair to say that we will, to Madam Deputy Mayor's point, we intend on blasting this out as much as we can and getting the word out. It's a great success story, and we want to get that message out there to the community. So excellent question, and certainly the intent from administration is to do exactly that.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions or concerns? I did get a mover and a seconder. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. G, awarding of the snowplow tender RDS 2021-22, that Curry Truck Center be awarded the contract to provide a new 2023 tandem axle snowplow to be delivered late in 2022 as per the proposal. Brian, you want to make any comment on this? Okay, maybe let us know what this big dollar spending is all about.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report in front of council tonight is for the award of a snowplow. That's within our 2022 budget. If council recalls, we received council approval earlier this year to advance the procurement of this snowplow. As some of you may be aware, the supply chain issues are significantly delaying the manufacturing of these plows. So the suggestion from staff was to advance the procurement of this snowplow for next year so that we have it bought and received within 2022.
Questions or concerns here? No. Then a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Levy, seconded by Councillor LaRose. All in favor? And that is carried. So you can anxiously wait for your new plow, Brian. Moving on to presentations and considerations of report Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole report November 10th, 2021. That the recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole related to Recreation and Community Services section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Cummings and Deputy Mayor. Any questions or concerns? Nothing to pull. All in favor? And that is carried. That the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole related to the Planning and Development Services section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Vadeboncoeur and Councillor Levy. Questions or concerns? Nothing to pull. All in favor? And that is carried. That the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole related to the Transportation Environmental Services section be approved. Mover and a seconder, Councillor LaRose and Councillor Clue. All in favor? And carried. And that the recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report related to Finance and Corporate Services section be approved. Moved by Councillor Sainama, seconded by Councillor Mayat. All in favor? And that is carried. Presentation and consideration of report special committees, a special committee of the whole report, November 24th, 21, that the recommendations contained within the special committee of the whole report related to the finance and corporate services section be approved. Mover, Counselor Sinema, seconder, Counselor Mayat. Questions or concerns? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Motions of which notice has been previously given, there are none, and notices of motions. So here we have from myself that I'm asking council to waive the rules. And it's in regards to the speed limit on 93. And the reason I'm bringing it forward is that I feel that it is a safety issue. What I'm asking is that the County of Simcoe, in partnership with the towns of Penetanguishene and Midland, have recently completed the County Road 93 roundabout project. And whereas the County of Simcoe implemented speed limits on County Road 93 when approaching, exiting, and within the roundabout, including a variation between 50 kilometers an hour to 80 kilometers an hour in less than a 3 kilometer distance. And whereas a consistent speed limit of 60 kilometers an hour on County Road 93 leading to the roundabout in both Penetanguishene and Midland should be implemented in order to increase safety and avoid motor vehicle collisions caused by winter weather conditions. Now, therefore, the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene formally requests that the County of Simcoe implement the 60 kilometer an hour speed limit on County Road 93 from the new roundabout from approximately 1 kilometer north towards the town of Penetanguishene and 1 kilometer south in the town of Midland. Madam Clerk, you have been waving to me.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so I'm glad that you read that motion, and in order to, I know we don't have a lot of these on the agenda, so I think it's a good reminder procedurally. A notice of motion is to be read. The person bringing it forward moves it, reads it, and then it gets brought forward to the next meeting where it can be actually discussed and voted upon. I think everyone might have heard before the mayor started to read the motion that he is requesting that the procedural rules be waived this evening, and that we actually allow this motion to be discussed, moved, and seconded and passed so that we can proceed regarding safety concerns. That does require a specific motion, so I'm going to assist the mayor by reading that. And if council agrees, we'll see a mover. We have a mover, we'll see a seconder, we'll see a vote. This vote does require 2/3 of council to proceed. So the motion would be Mayor Lemoon moved that council waive the rules to allow for the notice of motion related to the speed limit on County Road 93 be addressed due to safety concerns.
And I'm asking for a mover and a seconder.
I have you as the mover.
And a seconder, Councillor Cummings. And I guess then, are there any questions, concerns?
So, right, questions or concerns regarding the waiving of the rules, and then call for the vote, and you'll need 2/3 of council in order to waive the rules.
Yeah, so questions or concerns regarding the waiving of the rules? There being none, then I can ask for a 2/3 or a vote. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have more than 2/3. All in, as a matter of fact, unanimous. So from there, Madam Clerk, do we have another motion to go?
So then your motion would, the motion on the floor would be the motion that you read regarding the request to the County of Simcoe. We don't need to read it again. I think everyone heard it.
Yes.
And so we have you as the mover.
Yes, Councillor Cummings, the mover.
No, you're the mover. I'll be the seconder.
Okay, so I move and the Councillor Cummings seconding, and all in favor. Okay, and done. And I might add that the town of Midland, I spoke to the mayor of Midland today, and they are going to go through the same process. Okay, now we move on to consideration of bylaws. And you know, I'm just going to go that the council of the town of Penetanguishene introduced the following bylaws: 2021-55, 2021-56, 2021-57, 2021-58, 2021-59, 2021-60, 2021-61, 2021-62, and 2021-63. And that the bylaws be read a first time and deemed to be read a second time and a third time and carried. Mover and the seconder. Councilor LaRose, Councilor Mayat, all in favor. And that is carried. Question period from media and the public. There are none. Announcements and inquiries. Councilor Salama.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would like to take a couple moments for an announcement and a thank you. As the Chair of the Finance and Corporate Services section, on behalf of Councillor Mayat as Vice Chair, we want to thank Council for approving the town's 2022 operating and capital budgets totaling 15.9 million and the 2023 capital budget of 4.2 million. Our goal was to develop a budget that maintained or enhanced the service levels that our residents enjoy, focus on key areas that the public identified as priorities, such as road infrastructure renewal and replacement, and keep the tax rate increased at a reasonable level as outlined in the budget guideline. This was done through input from the public, council, and management through the town's online budget survey, the public consultation, and our annual budget process. I'm pleased to advise that the town has maintained a high level of investment in our road infrastructure with the 2022 and 2023 capital budgets totaling almost 2.7 million for road-related projects, which is 32% of the two-year capital program totaling 8.4 million. Grants and subsidies will offset this investment by just over 1.2 million, reducing the financial impact on our taxpayers, which is always a factor in our decision-making. Our two-year capital program of 8.4 million includes the investments of 4.2 million for the Public Works and Road Division, 1.9 million for recreation and community services, including our library, arena, museum, wharf, curling club, parks, and trails. 1 million for the Water Division, 645,000 for the Wastewater Division, 307,000 for Fire and Emergency Services, 130,000 for planning and development services, and 103,000 for corporate services. Some notable capital projects to be completed in 2022 and 2023 include the Peel Street redesign, reconstruction of Chatham Street from Burke to Brock, reconstruction of Harriet Street from Edward to Jeffrey, drainage improvements on Payette, surface treatment on MacArthur, Wozniak, Polish, and Caughey, Navy Lane drainage improvements, bulk water filling station, the town gateway reconstruction, Memorial Park tennis courts reconstruction, our arena roof replacement, Martin Valley Park Phase 1 development, and the library lower level development. Council has approved an operating budget that maintains service levels and provides service level enhancements in key areas identified through our service delivery review or by council as priorities through the budget process. The town's tax-supported operating and capital budget for 2022 is $11.7 million. Service level enhancements include increased staffing for the roads division and planning and development services. Enhancements to our online services will also be completed in 2022. Balancing these objectives can be challenging, as it has been in the last year, and with policing costs impacting our decisions. The town's 2022 operating and capital budgets resulted in an increase of $249,822, which was actually a 0.2% town tax reduction. The policing budget resulted in an increase to the town's policing levy with a 2.4% impact. Now that impact would have been much greater if we hadn't utilized the policing levy stabilization reserve and the tax stabilization reserve. So we were able to keep that at the 2.4%. The 2022 budget results in a total increase of 2.2% on the municipal portion of the tax bill, or about $22.32 per 100,000 of typical residential assessment. The preliminary overall tax impact estimate is 1.9%, or $27.79 per 100,000 of typical residential assessment for municipal, county, and provincial taxes. Based on the new assessment growth that's happened in the county, it's anticipated this may be reduced further when the county and province set their tax rates in March of 2022. As the chair of the Finance and Corporate Services section, I'm extremely pleased with the 2022 budget process to get to this point. There was a lot of good discussion around the table, and as we debated the financial decisions before us. In the end, I feel the budget strikes a balance between enhancing core municipal functions, supporting our staff, reducing debt, and keeping the overall tax rate increase below inflation. In closing, I'd like to thank council and staff, especially Carrie Robillard, our treasurer, the CAO, and all of the management team for the significant time and effort that was spent in finalizing our 2022 budget. It truly was a team effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Sanema. And I might take the occasion to thank Section, Carrie and our finance department, all of senior staff, our CAO, members of council, for all their endeavors and hard work to bring this budget to a conclusion and approval for 2022. Thank you. Further announcements. Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to give Huron Historical Parks a little bit of a shout out. They are planning an event for the next 2 weekends, and it's called Holiday by the Bay. It's 2 weekends starting this weekend, the 10th and 11th, and again on the 17th and 18th. It's a new event for historical parks, and just felt that I wanted to give them a shout out. People need to register. You need to call the number at Historical Parks, which is 705-526-7838 to make a reservation. It sounds like a great event. So thank you for allowing time to give them a little bit of a shout out.
Very good. Further announcements or inquiries? Councillor Klug.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another holiday event. Our wonderful Centennial Museum is hosting Fun with Santa December 18th. There are still spots as far as I know. I'm looking at our curator. Just a few spots left. You do have to reserve that ahead of time, and you can go to pensenmuseum.com, the usual website, to do so. Thanks.
Further announcements or inquiries? Councillor Buddenbacher.
Thank you, Worship. Members of council and the public may have heard that Carol Lambie is retiring as the CEO of Waypoint. I had the pleasure of working with Carol when I was the chair of the Penetanguishene General Hospital Board of Directors, when she was the CEO of the Penetanguishene General Hospital, and then when those changes occurred several years ago, and she became the CEO of Waypoint. And she's been an avid supporter of the town of Penetanguishene and the partnerships that exist between the town and Waypoint. And I'd like to suggest, Your Worship, if we haven't done so already, that maybe on behalf of council, we can send her a congratulatory note on her retirement. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartely, Councillor Buddenbacher, and I've also had the pleasure of working with Carol over the number of years, and it's going to take someone with big boots to fill the position. That's for sure. So, further announcements or inquiry? Further announcements or inquiries? I thought maybe you'd ask me to take my mask off, Madam. There being none, we will move on to the confirmation bylaw, and that is 2022-64. That confirmation bylaw 2022-64 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. Mover and the seconder, Councillor LaRose, Councillor Sanema, all in favor. That is carried. Move to adjourn, Councillor Cummings, all in favor. That is carried. So we are adjourned. Now, leave of council, would you like to take a 5-minute break, or do you just want to ramble on through to the committee of the whole meeting? No. Ramble on? Okay. So We will call the meeting into order and approval of the agenda. So Committee of the Whole Agenda, December 8, 2021. The recommended action is that the Committee of the Whole Agenda for December 8, 2021 be approved as presented. Mover and a seconder. Counselor Cummings and Counselor LaRose, all in favor. Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if anyone so has, may make it now or at the appropriate time. Presentations and delegations, all sections. So we start with a presentation from Nicole Jackson, the museum curator, read the land acknowledgement. Nicole, if you would.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and members of public. I am Nicole Jackson, curator of the Penetanguishene Centennial Museum and Archives, and today I'll be presenting the proposed land acknowledgement for the town of Penetanguishene that can be found in a report in your agenda. Over the last year, myself and other staff have completed significant research on the process of developing and adopting land acknowledgements. As part of reconciliation efforts, it is important that organizations educate themselves about applicable land treaties and the history of Indigenous peoples prior to adopting them. Becoming informed demonstrates the town's commitment to and understanding the history and meaning of any statement that is adopted. As a result, I will be presenting this brief presentation on the meaning, associated treaties, and peoples noted in the proposed land acknowledgement. So first of all, what is a land acknowledgement? It is a formal statement that recognizes the unique and enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. It is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to the people whose territory you gather on, and a way to honor the Indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Why a land acknowledgement? As part of the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, the federal government established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to facilitate reconciliation among former students, their families, their communities, and all Canadians. In December 2015, the Truth Reconciliation Commission released a 6-volume report with 94 calls to action to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. Although inspired by the Truth and Reconciliation movement, land acknowledgements are not one of the 94 recommended calls to action. However, many communities and organizations do believe that land acknowledgements are a necessary step towards honoring the original occupants of a place. Another reason for a land acknowledgement for Penetanguishene is that 18.5% of Penetanguishene's residents identify as Indigenous. This is much higher than the provincial average of 3%. By adopting a land acknowledgement, we are specifically acknowledging a percentage of our population. So there is no formal There's no specific formula or template for a land acknowledgement, but many include the following elements. They talk about the history of the land, any associated treaties within the land, local Indigenous groups, respect of the land. They make sure to keep it in present tense and not just in historical context. And they ensure the intentions of the land acknowledgement are in the spirit of reconciliation. As stated in the beginning, it's important to understand the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land and our place in history. In the following slides, I will point out specifically the first 3 key elements of a land acknowledgement and understanding the history of our land, our treaty, and our Indigenous peoples. Our land has quite a diverse history of different Indigenous groups in our area dating back to the beginning. As many of you know, Penetanguishene means place of the white rolling sands, and it comes from the Abenaki or the Algonquin language.
This Anishinaabe clan inhabited the northern Rocky Shield region and traveled south to this area during the summer months as far back as 7,000 years ago to hunt and fish. In the 1600s, or by the 1600s, this area was known as the home of the Wendat, with an estimated population of 30,000 people. The Wendat were farmers, and the closest known village to Penetanguishene was Tuanche, just outside of our municipal borders. In 1615, Sam de Champlain arrived to secure a trade alliance with the Wendat and brought the Recollects with him to try to convert the Wendat to Christianity. In 1626, the Recollects invited the Society of Jesuits, and they managed a French missionary settlement on the Wye River named Sainte Marie. It was during this time that the Wendat were known as Huron, a French name for boar, as their headpiece reminded the French of a boar's head. We now know we are one of the only original Penetanguishene or sort of indigenous names in this area, and it is because the Wendat told the Jesuits and the Recollects, and they put that in their diaries, and that's why we know this area was Penetanguishene, and we know that it was Algonquin because the Algonquins told the Huron of this. In 1649, Sainte Marie was burned to the ground by the Iroquois in retaliation for many attacks on the Iroquois villages. After Sainte Marie burned, the Wendat moved with the Jesuits to Christian Island, which was known as Sainte Marie II. Their first winter there was quite harsh, and by the spring, many of them fled with the missionaries to Loretteville near Quebec City. Others fled to the Wyandotte Reserve in Oklahoma or to Sandwich, Ontario with their neighbors, the Petun and the Neutrals. The main group that fled to Loretteville near Quebec City are now known as the Huron-Wendat Nation, and their ancestors are those that were here in the 1600s. Over the next 100 years, this area became known as the hunting, fishing grounds, and gathering space of the Ojibwe, or sometimes referred to as the Chippewa, which are also part of the Anishinaabe. In 1793, John Graves Simcoe visited the area to secure land for a naval base. He found the land quite favorable and proceeded to negotiate with the local Ojibwe Chippewas to purchase the land. In 1798, a treaty was signed with the Chippewa, as seen in this picture here is actually of that treaty, a copy of it. The treaty that was signed in 1798 was known as the Penetanguishene Bay Purchase, or Treaty 5. This treaty purchased the land around Penetanguishene Harbor so that a naval depot could be built where Discovery Harbor is today. 5 chiefs signed the document with their totem symbols of their clans, as seen in the previous slide. And now we go to the local Indigenous groups we have here. The term Indigenous peoples refers to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. These are the original inhabitants of the land that is now Canada. The Anishinaabe Nation, also known as the Union of Ontario Indians, is a First Nations political organization representing 40 Anishinaabe First Nations, or Anishinaabe with 2 A's, in the province of Ontario. Just so you can understand some of the different terminology. The Anishinaabe Nation includes the Chippewa Tri-Council, comprised of Bosley First Nations, Rama First Nations, and the Georgina First Nations, which is the group that signed the treaties in Penetanguishene Purchase. The Georgian Bay Métis trace their roots back to 1828, when they migrated to Penetanguishene from Drummond Island near Mackinac, Michigan. Penetanguishene is one of the original Métis settlements in Ontario, and 14.7% of our population identify as Métis. It's probably much higher than our Métis. That is just the percentage that identifies. And the original settlement for the Métis is actually across the bay along Champlain. So finally, here is the land acknowledgement that has been proposed. Penetanguishene respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people. This territory is within the pre-Confederation Treaty 5, known as the Penetangshine Bay Purchase, also the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and historical settlement of the Métis. Penetangshine is now home to many Indigenous peoples. Penetangshine is proud of its Indigenous name, and more importantly, that for thousands of years it has been and will continue to be an important homeland and gathering space for Indigenous people. We recognize that we are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters and are responsible to ensure that our mother, the earth, is here for future generations. As you can see, this land acknowledgement speaks concisely to the history of the land, the specific treaty of this land, and the names of the living Indigenous peoples from this community. It honors the land and acts as a present-day reminder to protect the land that we all inhabit. Elements of this land acknowledgement were pulled from the draft land acknowledgement of the Cultural Alliance in the heart of Georgian Bay, which is an organization that is partly funded by the town and I represent as a staff representative. Their draft was completed in consultation with the staff from Bosley First Nation. However, there has not been any consultation with the Bosley First Nations Chief and Council or the Georgian Bay Métis Council. In the spirit of reconciliation, it is important to initiate the process by providing council and the members of the public with historical information and seek formal endorsement for next steps prior to contacting Indigenous communities. It is recommended that the land acknowledgement be sent by staff for review or feedback to the Bosley First Nations Chief and Council and the Georgian Bay Métis Council, and that I will turn with a follow-up report to share the results of the consultations and provide recommendations about formal adoption. During the follow-up report, staff will also provide recommendations on when and how the land acknowledgement should be used. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, you can ask me now.
Members of council, anyone have questions to Nicole? Well done. Oh, Madam Zedema.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not a question, just a statement. I'm the great, wonderful report. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to see that we're moving forward with this. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or concerns or no through to Nicole? No? Then Nicole, thank you. Job well done.
All right, thank you.
So now we will move on to B, the presentation from Allison Luamo, Meridian Planning Rezoning Bylaw Review Updates. So do we have Allison with us?
Your Worship, Allison is with us. Sarah's going to actually share her slides for her and click through. So we'll just get Sarah to share her screen and then you'll hear Allison start her presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Luoma. I'm a senior planner with Meridian Planning Consultants, and I have had the pleasure of working
Allison, you're on.
Good evening, members of council and staff and members of the public. My name is Allison Luoma. I'm a senior planner with Meridian Planning Consultants. I've had the pleasure of working with staff to bring you a draft zoning bylaw, and I would like to present that to you tonight, along with an update of where we are in the process. So with that, we will start the presentation. So more for the benefit of our members of the public, just a really brief overview of what is zoning. The zoning bylaw is the document that regulates the use of land within the town. Most directly, it regulates how properties may be used. So how land and buildings may be used, where buildings and structures may be located, and other physical aspects of our community, such as minimum lot sizes and dimensions, building heights, setbacks of buildings from the street, as well as parking requirements. Next slide, please. The current zoning bylaw that regulates land in the town was adopted by council over 20 years ago and has regulated land use since that time. Much has changed, as you will appreciate, over the past 20 years. Populations, demographics, land use trends, and most importantly, a lot of the legislative requirements, starting at the provincial level and working all the way down through the county level, up to and including at the town with the new official plan that was approved in 2019. Given all of these changes that have occurred over this time, it is now time to update the zoning bylaw as well. Accordingly, in May of 2019, the town of Penetanguishene initiated the review of the current bylaw. Next slide, please. So tonight, what I'd like to do is just give you a really brief overview of our key objectives in this project, how the draft zoning bylaw has been laid out, our proposed zone structure, and there are a few key issues that have come out of the work that we've done. In particular, most of this has been driven by legislative changes that staff felt would best be brought to council's attention. Next slide, please. So in doing our work with the zoning bylaw review, we had a number of key objectives and goals that we looked at. Early on in the process, the decision was made in consultation with council to repeal and replace the existing bylaw as opposed to amending and modifying the current document. One of the key drivers out of all of this, as I said, has been to respond to upper level policy initiatives and in particular to achieve official plan conformity with that new official plan. Some of the other objectives that we looked at were more technical in nature, including to update to more contemporary terminology and best practices within the zoning bylaw, to be more reflective of current land use trends, and to address any outstanding issues that have emerged over the years with the current zoning. In particular, staff in working with the bylaw and through processing bylaw amendments, they get to identify where there are certain disconnects in the existing bylaw or certain weaknesses. And so part of our work was to address those and to strengthen that. And finally, it was one of our key objectives to produce a document that was more user-friendly and allowed for more ease of reference, not just for the technical people and the staff who work with it day in and day out, but also for our members of council and members of the public as well. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a very basic overview of how the document has been put together. And there are a few key sections here that are distinctive. In particular, we have now added a preamble to the front of the document. So this is a how to use this document section. So somebody who is not particularly a planner or who isn't familiar with zoning can refer to this section at the front of the bylaw, and it gives them instructions on how to move through the bylaw and find the information that they're looking for. The other sections that you see on the screen here, administration and interpretation, this is the fairly boilerplate sections of the bylaw. They address things like interpretation and enforcement. Zone structure identifies all of the zones contained within the town now. There is a consolidated definition section with updated terminology that is more reflective of contemporary zoning. The general provisions have been put together in one section, as is the case in the existing bylaw, but we have pulled out parking and loading into a separate standalone section, again, for ease of reference. And then finally, those last two sections that you see on your screen there, those are where we list the specific zones and the permitted uses and the standards that go along with each of those specific zones, along with the zone schedule or the map that's at the back of the document. Next slide, please. So the image there on your right is an excerpt of the draft zone schedule that we have. We have one zone schedule for the entire town. It is color. You can't see it here, but if you zoom in, it's also labeled and it gives you the parcel fabric. But we essentially have 5 key zone categories that are not unlike what you currently have now. Residential, commercial, we've lumped all of the shoreline zones into one grouping. Employment zones and other zones are generally institutional, rural zones, environmental protection zones, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So what you'll see here, these are our proposed new zone categories. We have streamlined the zones considerably from what you have now. So especially within the residential zone category, we really only have 4 residential zones now, key zones. The land lease community zones are very specific, and they only apply in specific to specific properties and situations. So there really is just 4 key residential zones. And if I can direct your attention also over to the shoreline zones, you'll see that we have grouped those all together. So you have your shoreline areas 1 and 2, your marina 1 and 2, and then your lakeside zones. Next slide, please. So there are 3 key issues that we wanted to touch base with you on tonight. These are primarily driven by legislative changes, and those are additional dwelling units, short-term rentals, and cannabis. Next slide, please. All right, so we'll start this off with additional dwelling units. In particular, what is an additional dwelling unit? So an additional dwelling unit, it's a dwelling unit that is subordinate to the primary dwelling unit on a lot. We would know these as accessory apartments or basement apartments. And the image there to the side will show you that in one scenario, the blue highlighted area would be perhaps a basement apartment within a main primary residential building, or in the image underneath, you will see that in a detached accessory building, we may now have additional dwelling units. These additional dwelling units, they are operated as singular housekeeping units, completely independent. So they have their own sleeping accommodations. They have their own sanitary facilities, so washrooms, cooking facilities, and living accommodations. Next slide, please. In 2019, the province passed legislation that expanded the requirements for municipalities to permit these, the provincial terminology is additional residential units in their legislation. Within the town bylaw, we will be calling them additional dwelling units. Now, under the new legislation, municipalities are required to permit these additional dwelling units in detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and in townhouse dwellings. The province also requires that these additional dwelling units be permitted in accessory buildings, detached accessory buildings. So what that means is that on a property that may have a detached house, you may now have a total of 3 possible residential units on that property. So you would have the primary residential unit. You may have 1 additional residential unit within that main building, that main residential building. So that may be your basement apartment or your attic apartment. And you may also have an additional residential unit in a detached accessory building. I would like to note here that as part of the provincial legislation, there is no appeal mechanism for official plan policies or zoning implements that implement instruments that implement these provincial requirements. Next slide, please. So this slide here really just gives you an example of how these may be organized. So again, in the blue-green color there, that would be your primary unit. That would be the larger or the largest of the units on the lot. And then in the red, you can see how things may be configured where an additional dwelling unit may be accommodated, either in a basement, in an upper level, in a detached accessory building, or if the building is constructed where there's a section of it that juts out, you could cordon off a section as well. So those are some of the forms that they may take. Next slide, please. So why has the province done this? Why additional dwelling units? It's really not a secret that we've got an affordable housing problem here in Ontario. And these additional dwelling units, they've been deemed to provide a short-term and sustainable response to the need for affordable housing. And when I say short-term, what I mean is that it can be implemented very quickly. It's not that it is a short-term solution, but that it can be on the ground and start and ease some of that in the very short term. It supports housing needs based on a number of different stages of life. So this is the type of housing that may be supportive if you have multi-generations of a family on a property, if you have young professionals, newlyweds, young families, grandparents, you may have caregivers. So in terms of a nanny for children or a caregiver for seniors that may reside on the property. And from a municipal perspective, it is a much more efficient use of infrastructure, using that infrastructure that is already in place. Next slide, please. So in the bylaw, a few key highlights of what we've done in our approach. So we have followed the provincial direction. So an additional dwelling unit, it is permitted and it is defined in the bylaw. And it is permitted in a main building on a residential lot, so in a primary dwelling, or in a detached accessory building. And it is permitted within a detached, semi-detached, or townhouse dwelling. Now, while those are the provincial directives, the municipality certainly is well within its rights to also include zoning regulations that regulate the circumstances under which these occur within our neighborhoods. So some of the zoning requirements that we've also put in place are that these types of units must be located on a municipally maintained street or road. They are only permitted where servicing capacity is available to accommodate the additional dwelling units, and that must be demonstrated. An occupancy permit will be required from the town. There will be a minimum parking standard put in place in the bylaw, which will be one parking space per dwelling unit. And tandem parking will be permitted. The province has included some regulations in their legislation that specifically address parking, and these are in line with that. We have also put in maximum size provisions in the bylaw. So an additional dwelling unit, whether it is within the primary dwelling or whether it's in an accessory building, may only be up to 45% of the gross floor area of the main building on the lot. So we're keeping it just under half, but we have also put in absolute maximums depending on the size of the lot and the size of the existing dwelling. Some of these could possibly be somewhat large. So we have also put absolute maximums in. So if it is within the main building, the main residential building on the lot where the primary dwelling is located, we're saying the additional dwelling unit may be 45% of the gross floor area, up to a maximum of 55 square meters, or in no case may it be larger than 55 square meters. If this unit is located in an accessory building, detached accessory building, we are saying the same thing, 45% of the gross floor area, but we are giving them a slightly larger size. We're saying up to a maximum of 60 square meters. These are in keeping with best practices that we have seen used in other municipalities as well. Where an additional dwelling unit is proposed to be located in a detached accessory building, we have put additional zoning regulations in place there that manage the location, height, size, and a number of other aspects of where and how they may occur. So for example, the detached accessory building may only be located in the rear yard. The maximum height of that accessory building may not be more than 4.5 meters, which is in keeping with the standard requirement for accessory buildings. We have put in some minimum setbacks from lot lines. We have also stipulated that an accessory building may not have, a detached accessory building may not have a basement. So we have put in place some mechanisms there to control the form in which these uses occur. Next slide, please. So moving on to the second issue that we wanted to bring to your attention is short-term rentals. The thread here is that these are additional uses or an intensification uses that we're seeing occurring in residential areas. So first of all, what is a short-term rental? And I would like to distinguish between a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast. So in the case of a bed and breakfast, you have an owner-occupied property where that is the primary residence of somebody, whether they're owning it or they're renting it to live in it, but it's their primary residence. And they may rent out a maximum of 3 rooms within their home for short periods of time. They may or may not offer a meal or a breakfast with that, but it is a primary residence and used as such. A short-term rental unit is a dwelling unit that is not occupied as a primary residence, but it is made available for short-term rentals with the intention of financial compensation. So it is nobody's primary address. Well, the zoning bylaw does include provisions to try and manage short-term rentals, and it does permit short-term rentals in the R1 and R2 zones in detached dwellings only. Zoning in and of itself really is truly a blunt tool to manage this use. What it must go with hand in hand, or what we recommend, is that there is a licensing bylaw under the Municipal Act that is passed. A licensing bylaw will give you much more flexibility in terms of managing this and in terms of applying fees and other enforcement mechanisms that you wouldn't otherwise have under zoning. Next slide, please. So my understanding is that early on in the process, it was the desire of council to permit short-term rentals as of right under the correct or select circumstances. So as I said, we have permitted them in the R1 and the R2 zones in those detached dwellings only. Regardless, though, we have also included other zoning provisions in the bylaw that would apply whether or not this use is permitted as of right, or whether it is only permitted by amendment to the zoning bylaw. And this includes things like managing other incompatible uses on the same lot. So for example, if you have a short-term rental that cannot be on a lot in conjunction with a garden suite, or a detached additional dwelling unit in an accessory building. So we have managed, restricted some of the combinations of uses that may occur where there is a short-term rental present on a lot. Next slide, please. So more specifically, here are some of the highlights in the zoning. So as I said, only in a detached dwelling. A short-term rental may only be permitted on a lot fronting on an open and municipally maintained street or road, only permitted on a lot with full municipal services. It would be limited to a maximum of 4 guest rooms. And again, as I said here, there are restrictions in terms of where it would be permitted. So a short-term rental would not be permitted in a detached accessory building. It would not be permitted in a recreational vehicle parked in a residential zone, and it would not be permitted in a tent or other similar temporary structure in a residential zone. And again, in that last bullet point, we talked about some of the other incompatible uses like garden suites that it would not be permitted in conjunction with. Okay, next slide, please. And the final issue that we wanted to bring to your attention, because it is addressed in the zoning bylaw, is cannabis. The existing bylaw does have some cannabis regulations in it. However, since those regulations were put in place, the federal government has come out with a revised iteration of the Federal Cannabis Act in 2018. So as a result, the bylaw will need to be updated in order to reflect that newer federal legislation. But I thought it would be very helpful here just to break down who has what authorities, because there are roles for all levels of municipal government when it comes to cannabis. So it's the federal government through Health Canada that is responsible for issuing the licenses for the production of cannabis, and that includes the cultivation and processing of cannabis. It is the provincial government that has the authorization for the distribution and the retail sale of cannabis. At a municipal level, cannabis producers must still meet municipal regulations respecting land uses as defined in the zoning bylaw. And the federal government does require that any license holder must provide notice to the municipality within 30 days of the issuance of a license, the amendment of a license, suspension of a license, or reinstatement of a license. But what we're focusing on here tonight is the role of the municipality, and that there is a requirement of anybody operating a cannabis production facility to conform to the applicable bylaw. Next slide, please. So in regulating cannabis, I think it's relevant to have a really brief primer on what's involved in cannabis in terms of why those regulations would be in place. So cannabis can be grown essentially in three ways. It can be grown as an outdoor field crop. It can be grown in greenhouses, and it can also be grown in indoor warehouses. And each of those is very distinct in terms of the requirements for the growing, but also the impacts of those forms. Next slide, please. So the outdoor cultivation of cannabis is significantly influenced by climate, weather, and topography. So for example, if you have low-lying areas, places where, say, on a foggy day, it takes a lot longer for the fog to dissipate, those would be similarly areas where if there were any odor impacts from the cannabis crop, they would be slower to dissipate also. It is also common to use hoop houses to grow cannabis. Hoop houses, as you see in that picture down in the bottom corner there, they're temporary greenhouses. They are not fully enclosed, and really all they do is they protect the crop from things like hail and wind. The outdoor growing of cannabis does pose a particular challenge because there are no pollution controls that can really be put in place. There are no air treatment options or technologies that can be put in place because, as you would appreciate, it's open air growing. So the only real remedy that you have is separation distances from sensitive land uses to mitigate those impacts. This is not unlike the approach that we use when we are talking about livestock facilities and minimum distance separation, or MDS, from livestock facilities for similar uses. The same construct or philosophy would apply to the growing of crops for cannabis in addressing the odor issue there as well. Next slide, please. So in greenhouses can come in all manner of scale, and you see that in the photos on the side there. They can be quite large, or they can be smaller operations depending on how that's applicable. Greenhouses utilize natural light, and although they do that, they do also have some form of artificial climate controls. They are working very much on growing in a year-round system. So you can appreciate in the winter, when our days are much shorter, then there is a need for that artificial light to augment whatever daylight hours they have, and cooling systems are still required. Greenhouses can exhaust significant amounts of air. There is a significant amount of that that's required in order to control the temperature and in particular the humidity within those greenhouses. And they can also have significant light and noise impacts on surrounding land uses, in addition to odor, and with the noise impacts that comes from the exhaust. The impacts really depend on the type of building and the air treatment control system that is used. In the growing of cannabis, there is really truly no one-size-fits-all approach. Next slide, please. And finally, cannabis can be grown in what are essentially wholly enclosed buildings or industrial type warehouses. They are different from greenhouses in that they are completely sealed from the outdoors. So there's no natural light. The air temperature and the humidity is completely controlled and recirculated. And the amount of the air that is exhausted and the quality of that is more easily mitigated because of the HVAC systems that are put in place there. Next slide, please. So just very briefly to touch on some of the impacts here. Cannabis is known to create odor impacts. These really depend on the specifics of the operation and the building that it's in, whether it's a retrofit building or whether it's a purpose-built building. Oftentimes, retrofitted buildings are not as efficient in processing and mitigating some of the odor impacts because the HVAC systems are so specific, requirements are so specific, and the higher ceilings they require and so on. Odor control is part of the federal licensing requirement in that air treatment control systems are required as part of their licensing system. And there are many technologies that may be used to treat odor for an indoor cannabis operation. But again, when we're talking about an outdoor cannabis operation, separation distances really are the only remedy there. In terms of light and noise, I can direct you down to the photo in the bottom corner where you see the purple haze or the purple glow, I guess. That is residual light that is coming from a large cannabis greenhouse down in Leamington. That's sort of lighting up the night sky there. That's where you have a lot of this artificial light that has been using in order to run these operations sort of on a 24-hour, 24/7 basis. So there are some impacts there. In terms of water and wastewater, the cultivation of cannabis has very high water needs in terms of both quantity and quality. There are high standards that are needed for the irrigation and processing, the cleaning and disinfecting of the cannabis. But equally so, consideration must be given to the quality and the quantity of the effluent post-juice for cannabis. Sort of anecdotally, the water requirements of cannabis are comparable or greater to those needed for tender fruit crops down in the Niagara region. So consideration does have to be given to the environmental impact of water taking in rural areas and within municipal capacity within the urban area, as well as for stormwater management requirements. And finally, for traffic, this again, there is a photo down there on the side, but considerations need to be given for site circulation of traffic, having internal loading bays, security, and depending on the rural, if it's something that's located in the rural area, then the increase in truck traffic on rural areas. Next slide, please. So having that primer, we have added a number of regulations within the bylaw to address cannabis. A cannabis production facility is permitted in the M1 zone, as it is now currently permitted in some of your industrial zones. And outdoor cultivation of cannabis, which again is the crops only, will be permitted as of right in the rural zone. Now, importantly, with the outdoor growing of cannabis, the municipality really does not have the ability to restrict the growing of that outdoor crop. The province has gone on record as saying they consider it an agricultural use. And so what the municipality has at its fingertips is to be able to regulate some of the conditions of that. So for example, requiring minimum setbacks from lot lines and requiring minimum separation distances from sensitive land uses. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, the bylaw does distinguish between indoor cannabis production and outdoor cannabis cultivation. That minimum 300 separation distance. There are a number of use-specific zoning standards that we have also put in place in terms of minimum lot sizes where this be permitted, the minimum lot frontage for lots that are proposed for cannabis operations. We have restricted outdoor storage, obviously for security and other reasons, and that a cannabis production facility will be subject to site plan control. So that is anything within a building, grown within a building, and where those buildings are located. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? In the short term, we would like to move ahead to a public open house in early to mid-January, followed by a statutory public meeting at some point in February. Through that process, we would receive public comments and provide a summary of those. We have met with the steering committee on a number of occasions now and have had some really productive meetings with them. So we would again meet with the steering committee following that consultation and then prepare a final draft of the bylaw for moving forward. Next slide, please. There's more information available on our draft bylaw at each of those websites that are noted there on that slide. And for members of the public, should you have any comments or questions, you can forward those to the Director of Planning with the town, and we will be sure to take note of those comments. Next slide, please. And with that, I would open things up to any discussion, comments, or questions.
Okay, members of council, do we have any questions or concerns or comments? Council, Council Levy, okay, gotcha. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to Allison. This has been a long time coming. I've been working on this on and off for about 12 years, mostly off, but anyway, grand to see. Love the way that the provincial policy guidelines have been incorporated. My only question would be, when it comes to the accessory dwellings separate from the primary residence, I'm concerned about the fact that it has to be an accessory dwelling would have to be in the rear yard, because we have some very unusual lot sizes in town. I have no intention of doing it, but I have a small house on a massive lot, but a great deal of my property would be beside my house or in front of my house. And I'm wondering why a small accessory dwelling would be not recommended in front or on the side.
Primarily what we've done is we've looked at some of the standard lot sizes and lot configurations in putting that together. But certainly I am more than happy to revisit that with staff and take another look and see if it's feasible and if there's an appetite to have them. Certainly I don't think we would see them in the front yard. But perhaps an exterior side yard, depending on the circumstances. But again, I'm more than happy to work with staff and take a look at that.
Thank you very much.
Further questions, concerns, comments? Councilor Boisdeboncoeur?
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation as well. And my question has to do with the additional dwelling units. It has to do with the amenity areas on a lot. So that would be the front yard, the green space, the rear yard, the green space. Have we dealt with in the new zoning bylaw any amendments to those provisions with respect to the amenity area? My fear is that people may, in particular circumstances, decide to put the additional parking in an area which traditionally has been the front lawn, and that will reduce that that amenity area or that green space. And I was just wondering whether that has been a consideration as part of the discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for your question. So all of the provisions that would apply to accessory structures continue to apply. So for example, we have a maximum coverage for accessory structures that continues to apply to those lots. So really, this is just a distinction where in some cases, the additional dwelling unit would be located within that additional accessory structure. And certainly parking would continue to be required on driveways.
So just to follow up, if I may, and I appreciate the answer. So if we're a dwelling unit, for example, has a single lane driveway, they modify to put a duplex in the basement. They need an additional parking space. They look to place that parking space in the area that was part of the front lawn. So is that something that will be controlled or regulated in the proposed zoning bylaw? Thank you.
Yes, yes, that is certainly regulated in the bylaw. And you actually bring up a good point in that in order to obtain that occupancy permit, they would also have to demonstrate that they meet all of the requirements of the bylaw. And that includes having that dedicated parking spot in order to permit that additional dwelling unit would go in.
Thank you.
Further questions, concerns, comments? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was part of the committee and certainly want to thank Allison very much for coming forward as she has. She got thrown into the process halfway through, but certainly got caught up very quickly. And we've had some great discussions in reference to container usage and also tiny homes. All of those kinds of things were discussed and are part and parcel of our zoning bylaws. So just a job well done. Thank you. Presentation was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allison, I have a question actually regarding the R1 zoning, residential zoning vis-a-vis STRs. What exactly are we looking at criteria-wise permitting STRs and R1 zoning?
Sorry, SDRs.
Short-term rentals.
Oh, short-term rentals. So as it stands in the draft bylaw, we have permitted them in the R1 and in the R2 zone, only in detached dwellings. And then we have included some of those additional regulations and requirements around them, so that they must be on municipally maintained streets and on full services, et cetera. That would be a matter for council. It's my understanding that there was some direction early on in this process to permit them as of right. Certainly, council does have the choice or option if they would prefer to permit them only as by amendment in the bylaw. That certainly could also be achieved that way. But as it stands right now, they are permitted in the R1 and R2 zone.
Thank you. Further comments, questions, concerns to Allison? There being none, then Allison, thank you very much. Very well done, very well presented, and I'm sure we will be carrying on.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
So we move on to the council information package and recommended action that the council information package, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Does anyone have anything that they want to pull from the SIP? Councillor Clue?
Thank you, Your Worship. On the November 17th CIP, item 4B.
Okay. Perhaps what I could do is have a mover and a seconder for the SIP, excluding the 4B, and then we'll deal with that separately. So a mover and a seconder for the SIP. Councillor Cummings, Councillor LaRose, all in favor, and that is carried. So now we will deal with 4B.
So this is a copy of a motion that was passed at the municipality of Chatham-Kent, though it's support of a resolution that originated, I believe, with the county, Huron County. And it's to support a resolution directed towards the province and the federal government about the housing crisis that we're witnessing. And I'd like to see our council support this as well.
Very good. Council, does anyone have any objection to this? There being none, can I have a mover? And I guess I will have Councillor Clue move, seconder, Councillor Sainema, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you.
So that moves us on to Section 8, Transportation Environmental Services, and I will pass it on to Councillor Klug.
Thank you again, Your Worship. We have no items on our consent agenda this evening. We have one matter for consideration, which is the intersection of Dufferin Street, Burke Street, and Robert Street East, Report ENG 2020-13. Might be ENG 2021, actually. That council approve option 3 to be completed in 2022 as outlined within the staff report, including removal of trees and other vegetation at the town-owned 141 Robert Street East property, which is attachment number 3, to improve sightlines at the intersection. Alterations to the line painting, stop bars, etc., and signage to optimize the sightlines for traffic entering the intersection and provide visual cues for motorists. Can I have a mover and a seconder before we proceed to any discussion? Councillor Rose has moved. Deputy Mayor seconded. So for council's reminder, this is a referral item brought back from our director. That's a difficult intersection. We're trying to find some interim measures. And I will open it for any comments or questions. Deputy Mayor?
In one of the schedules, the triangle that's in purple, is that where you would take away the vegetation?
I'll provide our Director of Public Works. He's nodding, but if he has any comments he'd like to make.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Deputy Mayor, that's correct. We would be taking vegetation out at that triangular piece of property. We would only remove as much vegetation as necessary to improve sightlines there. There's a number of trees and bushes in that location that we would clear out to improve sightlines for traffic coming off of Robert East and for traffic going on to Robert East from Burke and Dufferin.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sanema, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you very much. Through you to, I always get our terminology incorrect, so our director, so thank you. I mean, the proposals are interesting. The recommendation, are you looking at that as just being a temporary measure? And then some concerns are if by removing that, I mean, it will improve the sightline for sure, but it will also improve the sightline from Robert Street going on to Burke, and it may speed up the traffic. Like that really is a wild corner. And so I guess it's just there's a little concern whether that is going to correct or even assist with the problem, or if it's going to make it again any worse.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Sanema, in terms of the traffic turning movements at that intersection, it would definitely improve the safety of those for sure. In terms of speed, the speed at which the traffic is turning into that intersection, what I would suggest, if that is the issue at that intersection, as opposed to actually vehicle movements in that intersection, if speed is a concern, there's other interim traffic calming measures that could be considered at that location. I think line painting would also improve things as well in terms of visibility, altering where people are stopping in those intersections to provide a better movement of traffic, and line painting for pedestrians, making the pedestrian crossings a little bit more visible than they are right now. Is definitely something that we have in our ability to do from an operational perspective.
Go ahead.
As a further point, is it and is this possible? And this is directed with Stacy as well, to suggest that we do that immediately or in the 2022 planning, but then also incorporate the cul-de-sac in the 2023 like budget process, so that that could be part of it. So do them as a combination?
Certainly, it could be implemented as an interim measure, as we're recommending in the report. Future more permanent installations could be considered as part of a future budget process where more substantial costs would be involved, and that could be put forward during the next budget process for sure.
Thank you, Councilor Sanema. Councilor Vadimokar, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the report. As somebody who lives on Dufferin and uses this intersection on a regular basis, I think the pruning of the trees or removal of a couple of trees will assist with visibility as you come up to that intersection. I can assist in that regard, Mr. Director, if you need some input as somebody who uses that intersection, as I said. The other point of visibility is looking west on Robert Street. That is tricky because where the location of the stop bar is on Dufferin, you have to stop and then come out a little bit to look left before you make that turn. And currently, and it's been something that's been an issue for a while, the snowbank at the intersection or at the triangle there at Burke and Robert Street does get high. I know it's a challenge because there's a sidewalk there, and then there's you're coming to a point, so all the snow collects. And even myself with driving an SUV, which is a little higher, I still get challenged even today to look left through that snowbank to see the vehicles that are traveling east. So that's something to consider. I wasn't able to attend the November 10th meeting, and there was a lot of discussion about this. And I remember the chair, Councillor Clue, talking about traffic calming, and I thought part of the referral was to deal with the traffic calming. To speak to Councillor Sanema's point, the traffic on Robert Street that takes that gradual turn on Burke is probably traveling 50 to 60 in that range, and they just make that quick right and head straight down Burke without thinking. They're just going. So when they're hitting that top end of Burke, they're going at a pretty good speed, and I think speed in that area is an issue. I think it takes them time to slow down a bit before I'm in a residential area, because they've just come from Fuller or they've come from Centennial, and then they're traveling at a good speed. So I think that's something from a traffic calming standpoint in terms of trying to look at eliminating or reducing the speed as they make that turn. My final comment with respect to the cul-de-sac, and I think the report explains it well, Mr. Director, with respect to the opportunities and the limitations. You've identified it. It's something that I guess could be considered. There's some land acquisition matters that have to be addressed. I would encourage the municipality to continue to work in that regard, to look at the potential of a permanent solution. But I'd also want to understand what the implications of that is, because there are a lot of people, a lot of traffic that does come down Robert, head down Burke. They may be going to Church Street, they may be going to Fox, but if that is put as a cul-de-sac, where's that traffic going? Is it going to make the right turn on Dufferin and then head down and catch it some other way? I don't know. So I think those are all things that need to be looked at. And I think, Mr. Director, you had mentioned something about undertaking a review of that whole section of Robert. I think that's a good idea. If there's an opportunity to move that up, in terms of that study, that's something to consider as well. So anyway, I appreciate the report, and I'm glad to help in any way as somebody who uses that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Were there any other comments? Looking at Zoom? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. We do have this on the floor, so I will call for the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you so much. Moving on to our referrals, the motion is that the Transportation and Environmental Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. We have the 2022 budget request for road work at Robert Street East and Dufferin, which we just discussed, and the stormwater management best practices and engineering standards in late 2022. Any comments? I don't see any, but can we have a mover and a seconder for this motion? Councillor Cummings, seconder, Councillor LaRose, all in favor. That remains as it is. Thank you so much. That's carried. And we're moving to our question period from media and public. I believe we do have someone on the line. Sorry, our clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Klug. I'm just going to look to Sarah to see if there is anyone looking to speak. I don't think there is anyone on Zoom currently looking to ask questions, but I have two questions that were sent to me in advance and asked for me to ask. The first question is from Mrs. Ann Huguenin, and the question is stated as, in reference to Councillor Klug's previous mentioning of calming measures at the three-way intersection, Burke, Dufferin, and Robert East, what calming measures does the town plan to do to reduce the speed of vehicles veering off Robert Street East onto Burke Street westbound?
I suppose we'll bring our Director of Public Works back up to answer any questions. I believe it's pretty similar to what Councillor Vadamaker just made a comment about, but if Brian has anything to add, that would be great.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we would, as part of our interim measures in terms of improving sightlines, we would definitely be looking at adding in a combination with line painting, which we can do as an operational item within our operations for 2022, making pedestrian crossings at that intersection more visible. Additional signage notifying drivers approaching the intersection that there is these crossings at that intersection. So that alludes to more of the visual cues that I referred to in my report to notify drivers that there are these pedestrian crossings and that they are entering a residential zone. So signage and line painting, I think, would go a long way in terms of addressing those concerns. Also from an enforcement perspective, we could also put this location on our OPP detachments radar in terms of getting a site-specific enforcement in this location as well.
Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, you had another question to share?
Thank you, Councillor Klug. The second question was from Tony Huguenin. Question being stated as, recognizing that the entire length of Burke Street is designated no heavy vehicles under your traffic/parking bylaw, will the town post a no heavy vehicles sign on Burke Street at its east end at Dufferin Street?
Again, through you, Madam Chair, looking at our no heavy vehicles or no truck route policy that we have in place. If Burke Street is one of them and it's missing a sign, we can definitely install that for sure.
Thank you for taking those questions, our Director, and to Madam Clerk for sharing those with us. I believe we've addressed all of the things, unless anyone else? Nope. Great. I will turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Klug. And with that, then we will move on to Section B, Recreation and Community Services, and I will turn it over to Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item A, our consent agenda this evening, we have minutes from the Trails Committee, Curling Club, Community Wellbeing Committee, and the Penetang Public Library. The recommended action is that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Do I have a mover? Councillor Rose, seconder, Councillor Vadamaker. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. For our matters for consideration this evening, we have 3 items on the agenda. The first one being the boat tour RFP results. We had a couple of RFPs for boat tour. I'll just ask that the director give a highlight of what happened during this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The town, if council will recall, we provided a memo to advise council that we had more than one operator who was interested in securing dockage space at the wharf for the purpose of offering boat tours. And so we released a request for proposal. We received 2 responses. Both individuals had provided submissions. Staff have outlined in the report a summary of the evaluation criteria that was included in the RFP. The proponents have been identified as submission 1 and 2 or submission A and B, just to keep any biases out of the evaluation, and so that the evaluation criteria and what was submitted is considered equally. It is staff's opinion that the first proposal, proponent A, I believe it was submission A, that was identified as the preferred proposal for the reasons outlined in the report, and we're seeking council direction to negotiate an agreement and bring it back to council for approval.
Thank you. This was a really good RFP process. I've never seen this before with type of tours that are being offered. So I commend the director for having done this. I'm going to read the motion, and then if there's any discussion, we'll go from there. The recommended action in this case is that staff proceed with negotiating an agreement for boat tour operations at the municipal wharf with the proponent who submitted proposal A in response to the request for proposals, and that staff be directed to bring forward the bylaw with an agreement for council approval. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sanama, second. Councillor Vadamoncourt. Any discussion? Questions for the director? No, seeing none. Call for the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is the Town of Penetanguishene's land acknowledgement. I don't think we need to go any further with any explanation. I think Nicole did a fantastic job this evening. The last slide that you saw was the actual land acknowledgement that they wish to proceed to go to the BFN and the Canadian or the Métis Association. So the recommended action is that staff be directed to consult with the Bosley First Nations Chief and Council and the Georgian Bay Métis Council on the proposed land acknowledgement as outlined in the staff report, and the staff provide a follow-up report on the results of the consultations for awareness and educational purposes, including recommendations on the potential applications of the land acknowledgement. And finally, that a final land acknowledgement be brought forward for formal adoption by the town of Penetanguishene. I have a mover. Councillor Sanama, seconded. Councillor Levy. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The last one on our agenda is the Ships Company of Penetanguishene Agreement, RCS 2021-34. The recommended action is that this draft agreement as presented in attachment 1 between the town of Penetanguishene and the Ships Company of Penetanguishene be approved, and that the Chief Administrative Officer and the Director of Recreation and Community Services be given delegated authority to negotiate new terms during the course of the agreement that would permit the Ships Company to offer passenger carrying services or make minor adjustments that don't substantially change the agreement, and that staff be directed to bring forward the bylaw with the agreement for council approval. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sanama, seconded. Councillor Rose. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Referrals to the upcoming agenda, that the Recreation and Community Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas for staff. We have one on our agenda. And we'll move first of all to get it on the floor, and then we'll look for any changes. Is there a mover? Deputy Mayor, seconder? Councillor Mayette. Okay. Is there any additions or subtractions? Councillor Vadamoncourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is one item there that I asked to be put on, and I think that events have overtaken that. So with the reports that we're getting from staff on a regular basis and what the province has done with respect to opening things up, I don't think it's required any further.
Thank you. So are we in agreement? We can take it off? Okay, we can take that one off. Item D is questions from the media and the public. There are no questions from the media and public. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. That will bring us to 8, Section C, Planning and Community Development Services. And Councillor Levy has asked that Councillor Vadeboncourt chair this section. So Councillor Vadeboncourt.
Thank you, Worship. So referring to your Planning and Community Development Services section, we have 6 items on the consent agenda. Does anybody want any of those items pulled? Seeing none, may I have a mover for the motion that the following consent items, having been given due consideration, be received for information? Mover, Councillor Cummings, the seconder, Councillor Rose. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion's carried. Thank you. Move on to matters for consideration. We have 5 items for committee's consideration this evening. The first item is an amendment to the Clean Yards bylaw, and I'll read the recommended action. I'll seek a mover and a seconder, and then we'll open up for a discussion. The recommended action is that bylaw 2011-54, being a bylaw to provide for the maintaining of land in a clean and clear condition, be amended in accordance with staff report BL 2021-11, including a requirement for maintenance of property, increase the fee associated with contravention of the bylaw, a process by which reoccurring infraction can be addressed without the requirement to provide further notice, and that staff be directed to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council approval. So may I have a mover for this? Councillor Sanama, seconder, Councillor Rose. I'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion? Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Vadeboncourt. Just a comment, actually, is that my feeling is long overdue and welcome, welcome, welcome.
Any other comments? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Again, just a comment, great report, and I think it's going to make our bylaw officers' job much easier. Thank you.
Any further comments? I had a question to the director. We discussed this at the section meeting, and it had to do with the mechanism to ensure enforcement. If somebody is in violation of the bylaw, the new bylaw as adopted, will we be able to issue tickets to those that are in violation to kind of speed up the process of dealing with somebody that might be in violation?
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Vice Chair. So this was a discussion that we talked about, and I followed up with our bylaw officer. And so what I think maybe is missing from the version that you see is there are attached schedules to that Clean Yards bylaw that does have those set fines already contained within them. And so that we're not proposing to touch those, and they continue to exist as a tool for the bylaw officers to use.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the proposed amendments to the Clean Yards bylaw? Seeing none, we had a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Moving on to the second item, and this was a referral report. It has to do with the Community Development Fund Reserve Policy. And again, I'll read the recommended action and then I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Recommended action that the amended Community Development Reserve Policy 2021-14 be approved in keeping with staff report PL 2021-61, including format to be consistent with the approved template, minor clerical changes, including updates to the names of municipal incentive programs, removal of property acquisition as being an ineligible expense. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Sanama, Deputy Mayor Dubo. Is there a brief staff presentation on this for the benefit of committee? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. So this is a referral item, and it was a policy that was created a number of years ago that would help the municipality manage the funds associated with revenue collected for land sales. And so it was brought as a referral to come back to this committee and look at how it's being used and how any changes could be incorporated in it to make it a better policy for the town. During the review of it, we identified that there's not really a good example to use. We contacted a number of municipalities and nobody else has something quite like this. So I think we were commended for taking the lead with something like this, but it does leave a little bit of ambiguity about how it could be used. So it was discussed at our technical review committee meeting. We largely wanted to take it back to how it was intended back in 2013 to focus on two programs, that being the Heritage Tax Rebate and the Community Development, the Community Improvement Plan. Staff also suggested that one of the exclusions from the existing policy is for land acquisition costs. And it was discussed that, that might be something that we want to continue to include or want to change to include in the policy as it's part of an overall benefit to the town. So the policy is just minor updates to it. And there was some content in the staff report about how that fund has been used in the past. So between myself and the treasurer, Carrie, we could answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the explanation. I'm going to go to Councillor Levy, as she was the one who had the referral, and see if Councillor Levy has any questions or comments on the report. Councillor Levy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some comments, as I discussed with the planner today when I caught up on the my own version of the section meeting. I'm not content with this response. I found that the reason I asked for this is I wanted a little more specifics on what it could be used for. Specifically, it's supposed to be, or when I asked that we start this back in whatever year it was, the idea was to keep promoting plans to increase development, to enhance development, and in the past several years, I've seen it used basically as a slush fund for any department that was having some budgetary issues or who had a project going over budget. And that was certainly not the intent. And I'd like to see a little more well-defined. And I quite frankly don't care that we're the only ones around doing this. I think it was a great plan. And this year, since we sold so many properties and we have such a surplus in this fund, it's become even more crucial that we use it judiciously. I have no problem with it funding the Heritage Tax Rebate, the SIP program, but the bulk of it should remain for further enhancing future development. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm kind of thinking the opposite way. I look at these lands that they are the lands of the people of Penetanguishene. We bought them, acquired them somehow for everybody. So to be specific that it can only be used for one or two or three specific things, to me, doesn't make sense. If we have surplus land and we need to sell that to complete a project, whatever that project is, if the council of the day deems that that is an important enough project, those funds should be available and allocated. So I would be the opposite and not want it very specific.
Thank you. Counselor, any other comments or questions on this matter? Seeing none, I have a mover and a seconder, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And we have one opposed, but the motion carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is short-term rental units, licensing options, and I see the Director of State at the podium. That's I think a good idea. This is a referral report as well. I'll read the recommended action and seek a mover and seconder, and then we'll open it up. So the recommended action, the staff be directed to obtain community feedback with respect to a possible licensing bylaw for short-term rental units through a variety of mechanisms, including a survey and public meeting. May I have a mover? Councillor Cummings, and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Dubo. So it's on the floor. I'll turn it over to the director. Maybe she can provide us an outline of the report and the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vadaboncourt. So it's not by mistake or coincidence that the zoning bylaw with the definitions and regulations around what the town may want to consider regulating through zoning was on tonight's agenda, which complements this licensing bylaw and the report that's being proposed. As you heard Allison note in her presentation, that experiences that we've heard from other municipalities and the professionals and consultants in the field, that zoning is one way of addressing short-term rentals, but the best tool a municipality can use is under the Municipal Act, and it's in regards to licensing. And so that's the path that I think we need to go down and explore with our community. And so with that, we investigated a number of jurisdictions and what they've done around short-term rentals. We know some of our neighbors, such as Tiny Township, have established task force and are actively making decisions about these types of things. Without having all the feedback from our community, we wanted to make sure that we're making it clear to them what was being proposed. And so the recommendation really is to take some of those examples of other licensing bylaws, open it up for public feedback, and come back to council with a report on what a licensing bylaw could look like for the town. I would note that a licensing bylaw doesn't require the zoning to be in effect, so the council can proceed with a licensing outside the zoning. The difference is the zoning permits the use in certain areas, where right now it's permitted all across town. There's no prohibitions around that. So we do eventually want the zoning bylaw to catch up, but licensing may be the quickest tool, I think, to get the municipality involved in short-term rentals. So with that, the staff report, I believe, indicates that we would do some consultation in the spring and then hope for some sort of bylaw to be presented to council prior to next summer season. So I think that is as brief as I can be. I can happily answer any questions from council.
Thank you, Madam Director. This is a referral item from His Worship, so I'll go to His Worship and see if he has any questions or comments.
The only thing that I have a concern with, again, is the short-term rentals in an R1 zoning. I'm glad to see that we can probably curb some of that through licensing, and I certainly hope that we are going out to the public for some info, but at the same time that council themselves would have input as to what the licensing would be.
Thank you, Worship. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Clue.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just a comment. I'm not supportive of short-term rentals in general. I'm happy to hear community feedback about it and would really like to see at least this licensing happen in the meantime until we deal with our zoning. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clue. Any other comments from members of council? Looking up. So there are, if I may, there are implications to this, and from a standpoint, and if we enter into a licensing regime, there are staff implications in terms of the enforcement. So there's the administration of a licensing program. And I think that has to be part of the discussion when we're looking at this. There is enforcement, there is administration, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the only thing I would ask, is that when we're looking at it, we also look at, not only the impacts or implications in the community, but the impacts and implications internally in terms of in being involved in or getting involved in such a program. That's my comment. Anything further? So you've heard the question. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. Sorry, the next item is item 4, which is the results of public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment, file number ZA6 2021 97 and 95 Point Street, PL-2021-80. And I'll read the recommended action and look for a mover and a seconder. Recommended action that the application for a zoning bylaw amendment, file number ZA6/2021 respecting 97 and 95 Point Street be approved, and that the council of the town of Penetanguishene deems the application to be consistent with and conforming to provincial policies, the county official plan, the town's official plan, and in compliance with the town's zoning bylaw. So that's the recommendation. May I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Mayat. May I have a seconder? Councillor Cummings. So it's now on the table. I'll turn it over to the director and she can provide a brief synopsis of the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vadaboncourt. So this is a follow-up to a September public meeting where we heard from the public about a proposed zoning amendment for these properties. The intention is to rezone the properties and consolidate them into one parcel of land and then build a 5-unit apartment on the property. So we heard back from the community quite loudly and quite strongly at the public meeting, and we went back and took some of the questions that were raised and had the consultant look into some of the concerns. So such things as traffic, sightline, safety, that's all been addressed through a consultant report. They've done some additional study and review of the site to confirm how it can be developed. And so we've taken those comments from the public, and in our opinion, we are recommending approval of the rezoning to permit this as of use. It's not an easy thing to recommend approval when there is such an outpouring of concern from the community about this proposal. What I heard from those public meetings is that there's this community loves their area, loves their neighborhood, and that the opportunities for people living in those neighborhoods could apply to new residents coming to move into this building. We've talked a lot about housing and housing needs in the community, being able to provide for different forms, different types of ownership. And so we feel that this proposal meets some of those higher objectives from the town. This would be a development that you might have heard of that is the missing middle from housing in the province of Ontario. I've also referred to it as gentle density increases or incremental growth. And it is a bit of an impact to existing neighborhoods that have traditionally had very similar type of zone permissions and land uses around them. However, as I've noted, this is a gentle increase in density. It's not the big impactful tower building that could be a future application. It's a way to minor increase density in a town and efficiently use land. I would also note that, walking around and taking a look at our communities, this was a permission that was zoned out over the years. So we used to build communities that had this type of housing, and now we've really zoned them out of the community. And so it's nice to see them coming back and providing that type of housing that's been missing. as I noted, you walk around and you can see where it was permitted years ago. And I don't believe the negative impact that the residents noted to council is there. So it was with our professional opinion that we're recommending approval of the rezoning.
Any comments from members of council? Yes, Councillor Sanama.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question directed through to our Director of Planning. A bit of a comment and then a question. I'm concerned that the take from planning and from the developer was that the neighbors just didn't want to change the neighborhood, and I don't think that really was the issue. I do believe that a big concern is the safety feature, because that hill is pretty horrendous for going up and down. And also, I think the traffic count was done more in the summertime as opposed to when school buses and everything else is running. So I do think that was part of their concern. And that the other concern is about for the people that are in the back apartments, like the steps, like you're looking at 22 steps for getting up and down. And I do believe that that's a concern as far as how is the snow going to, like, I mean, I know it's the builders or the owner's concern as to how the snow is going to be removed or where the snow is going to go and how people are going to be able to get up and down and access that, those other units, and whether those things are going to be taken into consideration when the lot itself is developed and the planning is there.
Thank you, Councillor Sanama. My understanding is we may have the consultant that was working on behalf of the applicant online or close by, and he may be able to respond to that question. However, my understanding is I think we need to have council permission in order for him to speak and address that question. And I see that Madam Clerk putting her hand up, and I'm sure she's can fill us in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would in fact just be on your call, Mr. Chair, to allow a member of the public to answer under these circumstances. But it doesn't appear that the developer the developer is on the Zoom call right now. So I'm not sure if they're having technical issues. I think they were planning to be here. So it might have to be something the director answers.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Then we'll refer to the director.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do know that they were intending to be on the call, so I'm not sure if they were able to come or not. I would note, so one of the parts of this application would also be that it's subject to a future site plan application. Now, site plan applications aren't subject to public comment and feedback, but it does go through a technical review by staff and eventually does come to council for approval. So in terms of Councillor Sanama's questions about the design and some of those elements, that's some of the things that we will look at if this is the zoning's approved and a site plan application comes forward. I think in the package though, they have done some of that technical work and some of the things we still will look at in terms of parking access and parking sizes and that kind of stuff. I would note though that they did retain a consultant to take a look at the traffic sight lines, and those have been reviewed, and I think our Director of Public Works has reviewed with them too, and has no issues with their recommendations or findings.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Levy, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've had many concerns with this property. I know it fairly well, and I've gone down several times recently to look at it. I've talked to many of the residents in that area and listened to their concerns. But like our planner, this is the kind of housing we want and need in our community. We haven't had any purpose-built rental accommodations in our town since, oh gosh, perhaps the late 80s. And it's very much needed. And I do hope that the planner, as well as the developer, can come to a good agreement when it comes to the site plan. And we will get a chance to look at that and approve it. So after many discussions on this and reading many letters and having in-person chats as late as 3 o'clock this afternoon with residents, I am going to support moving this forward to the site plan stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. Any other questions or comments? Madam Deputy Mayor, and then His Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. Yes, parking is a big concern, so I would really caution during the site plan development that parking is really looked at. On that street already, there's massive parking. That boulevard is supposed to be a sidewalk for people walking, and unfortunately, that is not the case. In many, many occasions, I mean, that is my neighborhood, there are cars that are parked on the boulevard. So if this does go forward, I think we need to be cognizant of that and really work at keeping cars off that boulevard. So just something hopefully that can be addressed with site plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Vadebonkar. My question, I guess, is who came up with 22 steps? I have been building for over 40 years, and I know that when you're at the ground level and you're going down to a basement that's coming out walkout, you're going to be 14, max 15, not 22. So I just wonder where that 22 steps came out.
Those are the outside steps from where they're going to be parking at the back to get up to the living area of these are not inside steps. These are the accessibility for where if the parking is going to be on the back on Shanahan Lane.
Well, we're saying parking at the back. Are you talking about having parking off of Shanahan Lane? That's going to be one hell of a hill to climb to park, isn't it? Oh, I guess I was assuming that you were looking at 5 units, 5 vehicles parked all on Point Street. I didn't realize that they were planning on parking at the rear of the building. Well, I guess they better all have 4-wheel drives.
Thank you, Worship. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Klug.
Thank you. As those have said before me, I think it's difficult to see change in the neighborhood, and we'd all love to see just the traditional single family dwellings crop up there. But the reality is we do have a housing crisis, and we need this housing very badly in our town. And despite the technical challenges, which I believe will be resolved at the site plan stage, I think we should move ahead with the zoning. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Klug. Any other comments or questions? I had a question for the director. We did receive some correspondence from representatives from the neighborhood requesting a second public meeting. And under certain circumstances, there is a requirement for a second public meeting. In your opinion, the changes that are being proposed here, do you feel a second public meeting is warranted?
Thanks very much for that question, Vice Chair. No, we did look at that, and really what we would look at when there's a second public meeting is when there's been substantial changes to the type of ask of the rezoning. In this case, nothing really has changed. They're still asking for the same density. Really what would be happening would be an opportunity for the public to provide more comments back on updated plans and or the technical documents around the traffic and such. But those opportunities, I think, can still exist before council makes a final decision. And obviously, there's always the appeal mechanism should the public still not be satisfied with their ability to influence the decision.
Thank you. So my comment has to do with the 5th unit. And the reason I raised the point about the 5th unit is that I recall from when we did have the public meeting that 4 units would be permitted on the property, the semi-detached. And it really boiled down to having that additional unit. And I heard the concerns about traffic and whatnot. And like his worship, I thought perhaps the vehicles would be parking in front. And given the hill that the deputy mayor talked about in terms of, parking and whatnot, there'd be some concerns. But when you look at the conceptual site plan, it appears that fronting on Point Street, it'll look like a semi-detached. There'll be a driveway for one half and a driveway for the other half. And the predominant parking for the other 3 units will be in behind. Granted, there might be a walk to get up to the entrance, but in terms of traffic and impact, the bulk of the parking spaces are going to be accessed off Shanahan Lane. So from my standpoint, in terms of looking at the character of the neighborhood, if you were driving by on Point Street, you'll look at it and say, oh, that's a brand new semi-detached. You'd have to go in behind to know that there's actually entrances in the back to 3 additional units. So I was concerned at the public meeting about the additional unit. I appreciate the design changes that have been incorporated through the input from the public meeting and the provision of the parking there. So from my standpoint, I think that traffic issue or the safety issue, I think has been eliminated on Point Street in the sense that the additional parking is now off Shanahan Lane, which is a much less traveled road. So I will be supporting this. Any further comments or questions? So we heard the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, sorry, I didn't see everybody's hand there. So I'll put up all those in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And your worship, any opposed? 1, 2, 3. So it carries. Did I get that right? 5-3. Did I miss I missed somebody. Sorry, I'm trying to look at the screen and look at people's hands. So, okay, all those in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And your worship. And so we've got 6 and 3. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's just hard to keep track of the on the screen as well. So the last item is the zoning bylaw review project, draft new zoning bylaw. We heard the presentation earlier. I'll read the recommended action and I'll look for a mover and seconder. That the draft new zoning bylaw for the town of Penetanguishene be received for discussion, and that staff be directed to give notice of the statutory open house and the statutory public meeting under the Planning Act to consider a new zoning bylaw for the town of Penetanguishene. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Cummings. Seconder, Councillor Clue. Any further discussion on this? Any further questions of the director? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. So we have on our referrals, we have 3 referrals. The Community Development Fund, which we discussed earlier, which the recommendation will go to council. Regulation and licensing option for short-term rentals, which we're going to the public on, and the Beaulieu Drive road options, and that is to be considered in a Q1 of 2022. Are there any items to add to the referral list that anybody would want to do? Seeing none, I don't believe, Madam Clerk, that any of them should come off at this point. They're still all active, so we'll keep them on. So I'll read the motion that the Planning and Community Development Services section endorse the following additional existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Rose, a seconder, Councillor Sanama. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. The motion carries. And question periods from the media and the public.
I do believe we have someone on Zoom that would like to ask a question, and Sarah's just gonna get them up on the screen and allow them. I believe her name is Susan.
Hi, Susan. If you have a question, you're more than welcome to put your camera on now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Hi, my name is Susan Maynard. I live at 91 Point Street. And my question actually is to the planning department and to the future going on about 95, 97 Points. I'll give you a bit of a background, and I live at 91 Points. And when we bought the house, I live with an English garden that runs from Points to Shanahan because it's so steep that you can't mow it. So what I would ask is that you ask the developer to design a way that people can access the new building. There is a 12% grade up to their parking space, and there is another 22 to 25 steps up to the bottom of the building. I don't know, I just had my knee replaced a year ago. I couldn't do that. I think you need to send the engineers and the developer out to revisit how the people will access the building. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I didn't catch your name though, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Susan Maynard and I live at 91 Points.
Thank you, Susan. Now I can see you on
Oh,
our
thank
screen
you.
here. So
But
I appreciate your
my
comments.
major-
Our director of planning has heard them as well. I think that they're predominantly site plan issues. And certainly our director can take those back to the developer's planner and engineer.
Thank you.
And see what they can do
please
to try
also-
to address those.
Please also, would you, in the site plan, incorporate where you're going to get the 15 garbage pails? Thank you.
That's another matter.
No, but it's all part of the site
Thank you,
plan.
Susan.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, are there any other?
No, I don't believe there are any further questions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Your worship, I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Councilor Boncura. Moving on to 9, Section D, Finance and Corporate Services, and I pass it on to Councilor Sinema.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Under our Finance and Corporate Services, under our consent agenda, we have a number of items. The recommended action that the following consent agenda items, having been given due consideration, be received for information. The 2021 scholarship program, Finance 2021-41, the memo to council re COVID-19 vaccination clinic in Penetanguishene Memorial Community Center. Memo to council regarding the update re the CNCC policing costs. And item 4, the municipal and school board election 2022. Sorry. Report CL or CL 2021-08. Oh no, that's the next one. No, that's it. Sorry. It's hard to read sometimes. Anyway, if we could have a mover and a seconder, or if you wanted to move them all together, if you wanted any of them pulled. So, Deputy Mayor, do you want to move? Yeah. And Councillor Cummings seconding. All those in favor or any discussion? No, sorry. No discussion? Sorry. All those in favor? Good, thank you. So moved and accepted. Matters for consideration. First one is the Finance Municipal Modernization Projects Update. Finance 2021-42. The recommended action that FIN 2021-42 Finance Municipal Modernization Projects Update be received for information, and that additional municipal modernization funds in an amount of $50,000 be approved for the completion of the corporate phone replacement and online services upgrade projects. If I could have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor. Councillor Clue and seconded by Councillor LaRose. Any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Councillor Vaudemont did have a comment.
I thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question with respect to any of these costs covered by a grant. I'm not sure. I'm just looking at it and I just didn't pick that up.
I will call on our treasurer to answer that for you. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Vetabancourt, was your question, is it covered by a grant?
I asked if any portion of it is covered, any portion of it covered by a grant.
So the entire project, both of those projects, the corporate phone replacement project, as well as the online services upgrade, is 100% being covered by our municipal modernization funding grant that we received. So yes, it's 100% grant funded.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That has passed. Item number 2 is the Shelter Now funding request, Finance 2021-43. The recommended action that Finance 2021-43 Shelter Now funding request report be received for information, and that $100,000 grant be approved as recommended under option number 1. And finally, that the grant be funded using the town's contingency reserve and dispersed evenly over a 3-year period from 2021 to 2023. Okay, 2021 to 2023 is recommended under option number 1-1. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Clue, seconder. Councillor Vatabancourt. Comments, questions? Okay. And this is a question just, so we'll do our initial payment in 2021? Okay, that's fine. I'm having a hard time keeping track of all the dates. Anyway, we have a mover and a seconder, and all of those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much. On to referrals, the referrals to the upcoming agenda. We have the Huronia Airport Commission roadmap update and the OPP policing costs, the CNCC recovery. I think those are both ongoing. To have those removed. So I do need a mover and a seconder that the Finance and Corporate Services section endorse the following additional and existing referrals to upcoming agendas and staff. If I have a mover, Councillor Cummings, seconder, Councillor Mayotte. Thank you. All those in favor? So moved. Thank you very much. Any questions from the media? Thank you. Or public? Thank you. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sanema. Madam Clerk, did we have another item that we wanted to bring forward this evening in regards to the ask of $3,000 from virtual doctors? See, Mr. CAO, can you comment on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. This item was pushed out this afternoon and included in the updated council information package. So it was considered by committee at the start of the committee of the whole agenda. So that was in there. Certainly, I would suggest that there's mechanisms at a future meeting to circle back to that item if a member so desires. And if that's the case, then perhaps a member of council can connect with the clerk and we can discuss what mechanisms might be available in that fashion.
Very good. Thank you. So before I adjourn, I would like to take this opportunity because we will not be having another council meeting until January. So I take this opportunity to wish all of staff and all of council and all the public a very Merry Christmas and a well-deserved holiday period. So with that, we are adjourned.